I only watched it for Willem Dafoe, and let me tell you, I wasn't disappointed.
Because he was in it.
He was definitely in it.
Yeah. The cartoon is incredible. It's absolutely unbelievable that a show about a notebook, if you write someone's name in it, they die, that a high school kid gets. It's the best possible, like, thing that could happen from that premise.
That's cool. I've never seen it, but I've heard about it.
It's very much, I would say, like Long Sun, in that you hear people's reasonings for everything that happens in excruciating detail, and it's very entertaining.
That's cool.
Oh man, I think we're live. I gotta say, for the second week, YouTube has thrown me curveballs that I just don't like any of them, and so I don't think I get to decide when we're on now. I think it.
You don't decide when we're on?
No, I think YouTube now decides when the show is on.
So we're streaming at any given point in time that YouTube wants. Like on Thursday, it suddenly can just tap into all of our houses and stream.
Why are you complaining about stuff like that? I gotta say, they changed the format of the Google groups, and I hate it so fucking much.
When? Like just recently?
Yeah, like in the last week.
Oh. Well,
I hate it.
I'm sorry.
What Google groups are you in?
Like just Elfire?
No, I'm. Well, there's the kind of like femme one.
Lady list.
Was
Which
that
is
the one
much-
that used to be on
much
Facebook?
better and more
everybody got
active
real
than
mad about
Elfire.
it?
What?
Was that the one that used to be on Facebook and everybody got really mad about it?
It wasn't on Facebook. It was never on Facebook.
What
It
was
was a
that?
different one.
Lady list could be the name of an email list of ladies, but it could also be the name of an email list of incels,
Totally.
because they're lady lists.
Mm-hmm.
I don't actually know what you're talking about, but I just figure it's very different.
Like lady lists, like having no lady
Lady
without a
list.
lady.
Lady list.
And that's
Yeah.
like their whole philosophy is based on that, so they're lady lists.
I was trying to think of what a lady was.
I kind of find like I read an article about like incel philosophy, and so you know how there's like the red pill and the blue pill concept that like I guess you take the red pill if you want like the fucking right wing truth or whatever, and the blue pill is like the neoliberal status quo. But then there's like the incels add in the black pill, which is just like this concept that like if you want to take the black pill is like the real truth, and that's like
Is that
life is just like loneliness and despair, and you're fucked, and you're never gonna have a girlfriend.
is that specifically an incel thing?
Yeah.
I think
It's
I think it
started.
arose
It
out of that
started
culture.
from there.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
but
original-
I actually
People use that because people use that a lot.
yeah
I've never heard it before.
yeah
Black pill.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
think it's-
like. Yeah, it's like if you're ready for like the dark ass truth or whatever. Basically, it's just like the totally like cynical sort of I don't know.
Well, I gotta say, I got a white pill for those guys.
Ooh.
Be careful.
Everything is magic. Life is beautiful.
Like a
Suck
white
it.
pill.
Be careful.
Should call it the rainbow pill.
Well, white light includes all the colors. It's
The white is the rainbow.
Maybe still avoid calling it the white pill.
All right, how about the pill of light?
There you go.
Yeah,
The light
the
pill. There
light
you
pill. Light pill's good.
Yeah,
With
I
the-
think that the black pill originally was specifically about how if you're like a certain level of ugly, like just there's nothing you can do. You can't do any tactics. You can't do any diet. Like just man.
Wrong. All wrong. You can be funny.
Well,
That's true.
yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think they thought of that though.
Yeah.
I think maybe
Because
the
they're
incels.
inherently not funny.
Yeah, I think they think that they are funny, but they're thinking of a different thing.
Yeah.
They're thinking of a totally different quality besides funny, and they're like, I got that. No, that's fine.
Right.
But then the black pill came, it expanded to mean like nihilism, with broader context outside of the radical celibate community.
Oh, I hadn't heard it outside of the incel thing.
I think it's like in social media world, people throw that around.
Yeah, I think it's kind of just a general like internet whatever internet worldview concept now. It's just like in there.
It's kind of an interesting concept.
I think it's useful kind of conversationally.
To black pill?
Yeah, no, not to do it, but just like the term.
Yeah.
So,
like as a descriptor.
Yeah.
Who has taken the light pill? It's our friend Silk.
Mm-hmm.
That guy is as unblack-pilled as you can get.
That is true.
He's full on.
He's a virgin. He's a virgin.
He's like
He's not being a virgin. He does not.
he's like so he's so naive. He's so naive. He's like tripping.
Yeah.
Which is what being the fool is, right? Isn't that what
Right.
a little bit of that always happening when you're the fool?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Blissfully stepping off the cliff. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you're
in
hanging
chapter
upside
4,
down.
you definitely see that in chapter 4. Like, I feel like this is when you start to get to know Silk really well.
Yeah, you
Right
really
here.
get in his mind when he's
Yeah, when you see him
With Silk,
in his perseverance.
There's all these moments where like daydreaming. You get these weird daydreams that he has. I can't think of where one is right off the top of my head, but he's like, yeah, he has these like super like bizarre aside fantasy moments where like someone will mention something and then he'll like think about something irrelevant. Do you know what I'm talking about?
totally like how he's like, I do this mundane thing. Outside, there's giant fires burning below our feet.
Yeah, whenever he thinks about he keeps doing that actually. Like he just like keeps sort of like randomly thinking about like I mean I feel like that's actually like really true to life. Like you have some kind of like earth-shattering insight about something, and it's not like it's constantly in your mind, and then you're just like going your day to day, and then one moment you're just like, oh fuck, and you like remember some,
Yeah.
thing. Oh fuck, there's galaxies below my feet or whatever.
No,
Right.
I'm just thinking about when he's like musing on something. I mean, like a straight up like children's fantasy, like doing something really cool, or like thinking about people flying or something. Like not even flyers, but just like like legitimate like daydreaming.
I do think that
He talks about food a lot.
what?
Yeah, maybe like kind of like that. I don't know. I'll have to find an example, because I don't think I'm explaining correctly.
What, Connor?
I think I was going to talk about something else now that I think about it. I don't think it was as connected to this as I originally thought.
Doesn't matter.
All right. I really want to talk about Auk for a second, and how this chapter is Silk's catabasis. Like he's
Is Keta who what now?
catabasis is his journey into the underworld. And this goes back to so I have two big bodies of thought about Auk right now. Focusing around Silk saying like this guy's name wasn't originally Auk. He looks like a dog or a bear. Now thinking of Auk as a dog is interesting. Because he's Cerberus, right? He's aligned with Tartarus, although somebody at some point says that they think that he really belongs to Hyrax. the death god. He here is taking Silk into his first venture into the Nightside. That's why he has this secret dog name. But then this becomes also interesting because later on, Silk's going to get that stick, which he's like, oh, it's a dog-headed stick, and then convinces himself that it's actually a lion-headed stick.
Right.
And this makes me think about the Sphinx, which there's a big theory that the Sphinx was originally a jackal head. And or that it wasn't a lion at all, that it stands for a jackal, because that would make sense to stand outside of the pyramids, because the jackal is the guardian of the door to death. He's Anubis. So those are thoughts I'm having about Auk. Though also, it still kind of lands more of him being a bear, which would mean his name is Ark, or Arcus. Which then, of course, I've been really getting into bear mythology, and that is how you get Arthur, who is a secret hidden king that was adopted by someone else and raised in obscurity. Also, there's a huge theory that Auk's father is Kalditassa, that Silk, and he would be the actual heir, the real Kaldi, which is why in the end he also has this huge thing of power and is the person to actually lead people out of the world. He's the actual hero of the story and the true inheritor.
And am I remembering correctly that Chenille is also Chenille is the daughter of Tussa?
Correct. And his guardian.
That would make Auk and Chenille siblings.
Right. And so in the companion volume, they say that, although at first it looks like Mainframe is organized according to Olympian ideas, really all the gods relate more to Titans, but then there's also this kind of like secret Egyptian current going through all of that, which is why it's interesting to look at Auk as Anubis. But one thing that was really important for Egyptians, pharaohs, was that they married their sisters. So that makes it very interesting that Auk and Chenille are siblings.
Was that all the pharaohs, or just after Alexander conquered Egypt? With the
No, this is long before there was Greece.
Oh, okay. So the Ptolemies, they took that whole thing from their heritage. That wasn't imposed upon them.
Yeah.
Cool.
The Egyptians get it from like northern Mesopotamia, Persia kind of place.
Damn.
I think it's actually the Egyptians had this whole block of time, and then they had it's the Old Kingdom and then intermediary period. I forget what it's called, and where they're taken over by Persian people, but they're not Persians yet, and that's where they get the sleeping with your sister. And there's a whole bunch of letters from Akhenaten to the Persians talking about, we got to get talking about marrying your sister kind of stuff.
It's cool as shit that we are closer to Cleopatra than she is to the pyramids.
Yeah. Egypt's so old. It's crazy.
There was something on... Jesse was watching a James Cameron Under the Ocean documentary yesterday, and there was a part where they were like, maybe ancient Egyptians were right to worship the sun. And it was a really funny thing to hear on like coming out of a Disney production.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It makes sense. It's really like that and the moon are like, and maybe the ocean are the only things that make sense as like that you would see that and be like, that's God, right? Or like maybe like a rainbow or some shit. You know what I mean? Something like really cool. Lightning could be God. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
I think we're hitting the big ones
a lot
there.
of those early, like Norse gods and Titans and stuff,
True.
where they were, like,
Yeah.
embodiments of these like forces of nature or like celestial bodies.
Yeah, in Sumerian religion, the first thing is the ocean, and then it's killed by lightning.
That really
And yeah.
Um,
No, I mean, I have
just-
nothing to say.
I wanted to ask a question that's like sort of related, but not really related, which is, and I feel like one of you guys might know the answer to this because I haven't had time to look into it. But I was talking to someone the other day, and they mentioned that they had been reading about how carbon dating has just been like proven wrong recently. Have you guys heard about that? I haven't like gotten to look into it yet. But like everything's just older, much older.
It's so cool.
They found a better way.
That's awesome.
Can someone talk about that for me?
I mean, I don't. They found a different element with a half-life that's easier to zero in on. I don't know the chemistry of it, and I don't know which element it is. I feel like it's some isotope of uranium or something, but I don't. I cannot speak with any authority on this, but I have heard about this because I love reading about crackpots who are always excited whenever any fact is overturned.
Like,
Right.
oh man, that is exciting though. It's great. There's
I know. I mean, the way it was told to me was that basically it's just been proven that it's been so far off. Like everything is actually just much older, and like human civilization and like everything we've ever looked at is like much older.
The Vinca culture. There was a city building culture that had writing before the Sumerians were just kind of coming to accept. That was in like Hungary. Though people like, there's a bunch of people saying this is writing, and then there's a bunch of people saying no, that's just pictures. Is a huge fight, and also like Sumerian cities were multicultural, so they count more. Those cities were, had only one ethnicity in them, so they don't count as. But it's a crazy argument that's going on right now.
I'm just doing a quick
And of course,
Google
racist.
search. It's saying that carbon dating was getting more inaccurate because of the amount of carbon humans were producing.
whoa.
Yeah, but that are so recent. It says here that in this Scientific American article that there's like recent advances where they're looking for different isotopes. They're trying to isolate different things within the carbon, and it's actually getting recently to be like more accurate by doing this anyway. And that they can start, it says here, and who knows if it's true, I haven't read the whole article, but that they can kind of pinpoint it down to a decade by looking at the amount of this isotope that still remains in the carbon.
I feel like the lesson of this story, like if you hear this story told about carbon dating being wrong, and you're listening to a story, the lesson of the story is clear. You can go for years and years having this certain idea of a history that rests on like your special knowledge of specific facts. And then one day somebody goes, oh yeah, we were wrong. And then everyone's like, yep, yeah, we were. Okay, new story.
Yep.
And to derive like, okay, now we're better and we have taken one step closer to total certainty from that story is insane. It is absolutely
totally.
psychotic.
Yeah,
Nothing is true. Everything is permitted.
And
I've got my Wolfpack bingo card, and I'm marking off that conversation topic right here.
but it seems, I don't know, it seems like we're like living right now at a time when it seems absolutely important for like there to be some kind of collective recognition of the possibility that there are cycles and that we are in one.
Yeah.
I watched an interesting thing that this is so off topic of the book. I watched an interesting video where a science guy was like, let's just suppose that there was an advanced civilization sometime in the Earth's past. Could that feasibly happen? And the answer was yes, it was during the Silurian period. But like we can't prove that it's just like there's a huge buildup of carbon in that period, and they're like, and so if we just think about what we're going to look like in the amount of time we are from the Solarian period, we would look exactly like that, just like these rare earth, like big deposits of rare earth elements. So when
I
we
don't think that's
rare earth elements, we just dig down there and we're like, we'll take yours now.
I don't think that's off topic at all, actually.
Okay, bring it back. Bring it back. Tell me how it relates.
No, I just because I think everything's on topic.
Oh, word. Okay.
Well, I'm sorry. I shouldn't say everything
Yeah, be careful.
because then we'll just talk about superhero movies for a while.
Yeah, I want to talk about Black Widow now.
Exciting things are happening in the streaming wars.
I don't know. Big topics about history and cycles of civilization, I think are pretty much always relevant.
Try to bring it back as like a fun.
Well, there's a line somewhere in this one that I feel like I could link to this. There's just like, I feel like there's only kind of one line in chapter 4 where Wolfe is really like reminding us that this world's falling apart, and I underlined it, but this won't let me go from underline to underline.
Are you talking about where he's looking at the river and it's like dried up and he's like, will we have to build a new city closer to the lake?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, that's I didn't mark that, but I remember it.
Yeah, I want to say it's like a little bit past the halfway point or something in this chapter.
Yeah.
But I mean that's how this relates, is that this dummy, this dude who's like pretty much concerned exclusively with like the people that live within 5 feet of him and the gods, looks at the river and can see like, man, we're gonna have to move the city.
Yeah, and
Page
for anyone,
82.
it's on 82 exactly. And so that I have a general question, which is, was this society more utopian when it was built, or did it always have an element of? I'm particularly thinking about urban blight. Like I know there's like sections of the city that are like tough. Like, was it always like that, or did it quote unquote devolve into that, like having these problems? Does that make sense as a question? Like,
Yeah.
It seems to me that
Mention it at some point. I think they talk about. Well, I know that one of the main conflicts, if we even think that there are main conflicts in this book, are that the ruling dudes. What are they fucking called? I can't remember what they're fucking called.
The Ayuntamiento.
The Ayuntamiento has like taken
Prosimians.
so the colony is gone. There's this like other official in the city that is just gone now. So I think so maybe like that they're probably unique among the cities or the like
yeah.
So
Well,
like
other cities are radically different than Viron.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way we could know that.
what? I'm sorry to that.
The governments of other cities are radically different from Viron from the
Yeah, that's what
beginning.
I'm saying.
Okay.
That like well we don't know that their like whatever structure they had has or hasn't crumbled. Something potentially unique is going on in Viron
Do we have the same like social strata from the beginning?
of the book. But I don't know about talking about like the
Like is
history of
the
the
role like set up to have this like kind of stratified social system?
At one point, there's a robot who talks about all of how the world was built and why certain things are in place and why like there's this and that, but it's from a specific angle, and I don't know if he would talk about that. I feel like this question could potentially have been answered in the book later on at some point,
Like
maybe in
that's
the second book.
Like my question comes because when he's in Ock's place and there's like still like that glass in there, like that's like a remnant of a past time, right?
Yeah.
But it seems that there were these glasses everywhere, and that there were like lots of chems, or more so, around, and I'm just curious, like, was Viron specifically? I guess we can just isolate our conversation to Viron instead of opening it up to everywhere in the world. But was I guess just did it devolve into this, or was it designed that way? And it's just a question that I think is interesting, for to think about, like Wolfe asking these questions, and it kind of goes back to a little bit of what we were talking about with historical cycles, or just how societies are changed over time. There's this concept called behavioral sync. Are you all familiar with that?
No.
Behavioral sync. So you're probably familiar with these experiments this dude John Calhoun did, I think in the 50s and 60s, where he and I might have talked about this in Wolfpack before because I think about it a lot, but he basically built this utopia for rats somewhere in Maryland. Yeah, you all know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So he was like a social scientist or behavioralist, and somewhere in Maryland he had a barn and he built this enormous utopia for rats. It was enclosed, right? So it was like these plastic cages, and they had all the scientists observing, but the rats had everything provided for them, and it was perfect, just according to all the specifications of how rats want to live. Like they have all the food, all the water, all places to have recreation and to relax. And so they observed this rat society grow, without interfering too much, except for providing everything for it over time. And that over time, the rats started to like go insane, and they started to exhibit all of these really crazy behaviors that the scientists continued to observe without interfering. So the male rats were getting like either super territorial and like mean spirited and cannibalistic, or really isolated. And then the female rats were getting just like they couldn't conceive anymore. They weren't able to take care of their young anymore. And the rat society started to go haywire, and like they're killing each other, and they started forming these factions, and like it just turned into this like dystopia inside of there, and they just kept watching it. Anyway, I don't mean to continue on this conversation, but it's interesting. Like that is what happened, and unfortunately, people have taken these experiments and applied them to, like urban planning and things in dark and even racist ways to make all kinds of arguments. But I think that there's also like really interesting aspects to the experiment that can be applied here, and I'm curious if Wolfe was aware of that, because it seems like a similar situation where Typhon might have said like, okay, like here's an ideal living setting for human beings, like we'll just make this and provide everything for them and they'll be all set. And so I was just curious, like if people thought if that was starting to crumble and people were exhibiting these like, I don't know, like these like wars and crime started emerging, or if it was really like planned into the whole, if that was baked in order to keep things thriving, like.
That's a
I
very,
feel like
because I like, it's not just the people, right? It's the digital infomorphs of the gods in mainframe who are the exact same thing happens with them. They have the rebel gods and everything. So on one level, you're like, no, totally, it is exactly that behavioral sync is exactly what you're talking about. However, you then got to think that those gods are being run on a computer, and the whole purpose of that computer is to get these people to a new planet. And so when it gets there, it needs to get them out.
Yeah.
So these gods, which are in one sense individual entities, are also part of a machine that's programmed to then squeeze everybody out. So the gods, how much of the gods' action is their own, and how much of it is the machine doing its job?
Well, and as far as like Byron and like social structure, I would have to imagine like we don't know shit about basically any of the other cities, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and there's like hundreds of them, right?
Presumably.
So,
Yeah.
so
And we know something about Trivigant.
right. But what I would imagine is, and the one thing that we know is that it was intentionally structured for all of those things to be discrete, unattached, basically like social systems.
Right.
Like
I
discrete
mean,
from each other.
they're unattached, but they're not literally inaccessible.
There is
No, but they are basically like they're designed. The design that we know about is that they were designed to like dissuade as much as possible interaction between them. Like, not that it's impossible, but like they have completely different cultures, different languages, the geography between them, etc. So you
Byron
could
only seems to be
imagine
aware of 3 other cities.
what
Byron only seems to be aware of 3 other cities. And
specifically.
clearly there is much more than that,
Yeah.
you know?
But so what I would imagine, just in thinking about that when you're bringing it up, is that if it's the case that they're all designed like totally radically differently and function totally radically differently, like maybe part of that in design is that maybe like Byron ends up eating itself and that model didn't work. And like another place did work. And as long as like a certain amount of them don't totally collapse. Like if you design them all totally differently, then you're like you have a higher probability of at least one or some of them like making it through. And maybe they don't all, but like that's part of the design is like having this kind of like variety of the experiment. Like you're not just like putting all your eggs in one basket, all your money on like one system. You're like, okay, well, maybe this would get them through, maybe this would get them through. And you could imagine after like a number of generations that a certain amount of those societies would have completely collapsed by now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like we have reason to believe far in the future that most of them did.
But so I mean, it makes sense if you think about it in a structural sense, like that you would try to have as much different variety as possible, especially given that the part of it, the point that we know for sure was that they were designed to try to keep them apart from each other.
So then it's interesting that Wolfe, in a story that Wolfe writes, the one that survives is the Catholic one. Although the Muslims almost do it. The feminist-based Muslims. So that's interesting. Looking for the Wolfe into the mind of Wolfe.
Yeah.
You're saying now that everyone else is dead, everyone else in the world. But presumably, like, also, this exact story could be happening in every city. Like, every city could be having an enlightened.
Yeah.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
We'll talk more about this in Short Sun.
really?
Yeah. Okay.
Also, do we know for sure that like there haven't been, like if we presume that they've been in orbit around these 2 planets for a while, do we know for sure that there weren't, and like the people on the world don't necessarily know that they've like reached their destination and have to get off the fucking ship? Presumably, you could have had before now a point where you were in orbit in another planetary system, and some of the people got off already. Because they're not connected to each other. They have no concept of what the fuck is going on outside of the ship itself. So like you could have stopped at like 3 different systems by now, and like a certain number of those cities have like already evacuated.
So I'm not to the end yet, but what does getting off of this ship look like practically? Like, do they go down the tunnels and there's like a ramp or something that opens up? Like, what does that look like?
They get on the little boats or whatever, right?
Yeah.
There's like landing craft.
Oh,
Yeah.
there's little. Okay.
Have you seen Aliens?
Yeah.
I think it's like that.
Okay.
You're on a tiny ship and it goes.
You get into a pod, it takes you
And
off.
you
Okay.
crash into the planet and set up a tent.
Because I mean, you would think, okay, if like in thinking about what we were just talking about, and like you're gonna experiment with like different types of societies, why would you not also experiment with different planets? Like I'm gonna put so and so here, so and so here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why would you? I mean, if there's no reason to believe that if Typhon and his people, if they had the forethought to make a number of different societies discrete from each other on this big ass ship, why? Yeah, there's no reason to think that they would put all their eggs in one basket, planetarily speaking, either.
And actually, the more that we think of it, like, let's look at the other big spaceship we've seen and how that, you know, like this is just the space only version of the time ship of Zadkiel. You know?
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point, and it really makes me want to go back and read Fifth Head of Cerberus.
Read what?
The Fifth Head of Cerberus.
Oh yeah.
The novellas that are in the like. I don't understand, although I've read them a couple of times, exactly how they're connected to the solar cycle. They're said to be connected to the solar cycle. I mean, thematically, it's definitely the case, but if it takes place in the same universe, I don't know. I also found out that there's a short story. Oh wait, I can't talk to you about this part yet. Never mind.
Why?
It doesn't even take. It takes place in another book. Don't worry about it. We'll talk about it eventually. It's about Orb. That's all. There's a solo Orb adventure.
Orb?
Going back.
Yeah.
Going back to the design of the world, like it seems like it's designed basically like a pre-industrial revolution European country.
Yeah.
Or maybe even pre-Renaissance. I'm not sure, but you know what I mean. It's like with the different cities are like so blocked off, and they each have their own thing going on. So there's not a great deal of communication. But that's also how I think about the size of it. Like I basically think of it as like being the size of Italy, or maybe Maryland.
I think that the city itself is modeled after, presumably, Argentina, right? Like it's a Spanish South American colony, and we're just it's connecting into that new sun culture, right?
Yeah,
it's what I always assumed, because you got all these Spanish words and whatnot.
Yeah.
Like and that's where Typhon was based.
Yeah.
So
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
The talk, this whole discussion, and going even back to the rats, and Connor, to your comment that what's going on in Mainframe with the gods is kind of like what goes on with the rats in their enclosed utopia. It seems like a big thing that Wolfe is wrestling with the story is that, like, and even in the name The Outsider, there's always like even when we create our own gods in Mainframe, or like create our own gods like we have in our real life, like, you know, technology and meritocracy and democracy and these things that we believe in as being like fundamental truths that we've grasped, that control everything. Like there's an outsider, there's something that's not human or not entirely human that's underneath and can even affect those things. And I thought the line was in this chapter, but I think it's in chapter 5 when he looks at he's on the roof, Silk is on the roof of Blood's Mantian, and he's talking about how him building this particular wall here has had to change how all the mice and little animals eat. And he's like, to the mice and the little animals, Blood and the people the workers who built this wall must seem like forces of nature and like equally inscrutable and implacable. and then he says like, I felt sorry for them, but they probably feel sorry for me too if they knew what was going on. And I think that's like this discussion we've been having reminded me of that, of Silk looking at the mice and this sort of chain of effects of larger things on smaller things, where like Blood and his men have their own agenda, and it is like a very mortal agenda, and involves selfishness and deliberate goals that they have, but the way that it affects things smaller than them plays out in a totally different way. And that behind it all, like no matter how big or smart you are, behind it all there's an outsider. There's something that is like something beyond your ability to control or perhaps even completely understand, that also has an effect on everything that's happening.
There is an
I think that's the most I was just going to say real quick, I think that's like the most logical explanation for a god, I guess, like what you just laid out there. Right.
There is an interesting little bit in the companion book that kind of opens the door to the possibility that the outsider exists in Mainframe.
Well, really?
Yeah, which I originally found very upsetting, but I don't know how I feel about it now. It points out that Silk's enlightenment on the ball court, there's a scorekeeping glass on the ball court. So Silk could have received his enlightenment from Mainframe.
Ooh.
Whoa. Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
But as long as there's something real underneath what you can see and know, then it always makes sense, because Mainframe having an outsider can work because there's just a true force in the universe that resembles the outsider that is being expressed. That Mainframe can't help but express because it's true and it's there.
Right.
I don't also see any reason why, even if the outsider is outside of Mainframe, I guess this is probably a different way of saying what Ryan is saying, but I don't see any reason why that couldn't be expressed through Mainframe. It doesn't necessarily mean that the outsider is like of Mainframe.
Yeah.
And also the idea.
I just really was used to thinking of the outsider as being kind of the only supernatural entity in this thing, and now I'm coming to terms with the idea that the outsider is a program in Mainframe too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of want to make it be a scan of Severian somehow.
It's kind of like in Poltergeist when the ghost speaks to the TV,
Right, EVP.
Oh,
Yeah.
we have a comment in the little thing from Joseph.
Hey, Joseph.
Hey, Joseph.
Joseph.
Sip.
With an F?
Joseph.
Josip.
Joseph.
Oh, Joseph.
Yeah. As Silk does mention strange colors during his enlightenment, so that might have come from the score display, though the students didn't notice it.
Yeah.
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 I think it's it works because it's like the outsider isn't just only outside of everything. Outside is underpins it all. Like the spaceship is in space all the time, and that there's the things from lower or above, or however you want to orient it, outside, however you want to orient it, those things come through, and they bleed through on every level because they're there, because that's the space that we're hanging in.
Yep.
I think they both I love the idea that there is a physical and that seems like Wolfe's thing. There's always a little hook of scientific explanation in every bit of supernatural phenomenon. He never lets it be just the hand of God. There's always the hand of God always expresses itself through some material means.
The cybernetic hand of God.
Oh.
So what happens in chapter 4?
I have a lot of things.
straightforward.
that I highlighted that I thought like we could have an hour-long conversation about. And I have probably like a dozen of them. Oh, the first one. Okay, so this book is called Nightside of the Long Sun, right?
Yeah,
And then this chapter has the moment where like they say the name, and there's
it's when Ock explains what Nightside is.
Yeah. I don't really mean
Nightside and
Terra. Not exactly. It means, all right, look at it like this. There's a day way of doing, see? That's the regular way. And then there's the other way. The night side's when you do it this other way, when everything's on the night side of the shade.
Yeah. And
I'm reading in a different, like, I just finished the first book. I'm starting into the second one right now, like my personal reading. And there was just this really great part that I had forgotten about, where Silk is like, oh, maybe there's two Silks now. There's the night side Silk and like the day Silk. Like there's like good Silk, bad Silk. And he's like, which one? Or he's like, which one's the good one? Oh, he's like, maybe one's good, but which one's the good one? It's a pretty good section.
Yeah.
So can I talk through again? I'm always dense. I'm always trying to figure shit out. So there's like a beam that runs through the center of this cylinder, right? And that's their sun, the long sun. And so around it, there is like some kind of, I don't know what material it's made out of, but something that kind of goes around it right throughout the day. And that casts the shade onto that part of whatever's underneath, right? So that's going to be your nighttime, your night side or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. When that goes. Now, but the light reflecting from the other side kind of still bounces back, kind of like the sun from the moon kind of bounces back, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's how when the people down underneath the shade part, they can see what's above them, right? Yeah. Now, it must be kind of clear what they can see, though, right? Like, you look up there, it's far away, so it's not super clear, but you can see it pretty good, right? It's not like looking at a night sky, per se.
I think it's like looking at a night sky. I think that the ship is very big.
We've already been over it, right? It's far. It's far from your side across. Is really far. It's
right. It's really far.
Have you like when you're in an airplane and you've reached your like flying altitude and you look down, you can't see. Like what you can see.
Right, because there are clouds and stuff too.
Yeah.
Yeah, which are described as bars of cloud.
But like even if you were in just only like an airplane cruising distance away from the ground, what you'd be seeing at night would be like you're not going to see people. You're not going to even probably see a lot of headlights in motion.
Yeah.
You're just going to see these like, okay, there's stuff down there that's lit up. There's maybe a big patch over here of this texture. And
that's like 5 miles up in the air.
Yeah. Okay. Right? Yeah. Right. Yeah. So
and the Lake Limna is 76 miles across.
I'm looking at it right now. The entry in the companion, and it says in this entry about the whirl, it says having a radius, a cylinder of an unknown length, having a radius of perhaps 70 leagues, which is 180 miles, and that's a radius. So that's 180 miles from you to the sun. So you're 360 miles to the other side.
Okay.
Like so it's not near you. It's not like it doesn't look like the cover of the book at all.
Right. Because the cover of the book is misleading in a couple ways. I actually like the cover, and I love the cover of Epiphany of the Long Sun. But that this must be inaccurate because there would be more shade.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. There's no shade.
Yeah, it's inaccurate.
They wouldn't see this that clearly. Basically.
It just looks good. It looks good.
Yeah.
But also, each city. It says the world contains a couple hundred cities, and then there's a citation for that from the book, and then it says each
Jordan get Blair Witched.
I'm concerned about Mark.
Each seemingly separated from the next by about 50 leagues, which is 150 miles. So you're 150 miles from you to the next city, which doesn't mean you can't get there, but like that's pretty fucking far away.
Yeah.
So
people
is this world engineered into an asteroid or a moon or something?
probably.
Okay, it's
Yeah,
not
probably.
like it's not like built like a spaceship like the Enterprise. It's like probably like carved into something that already
Hollowed
existed.
out.
Yeah.
Oh, I think they probably pulverized a bunch of asteroids and shaped them into the cylinder.
Yeah, something
Like
like that.
there is probably an armature to it, but
Yeah, right. It's probably outfitted with rock.
cosmic rays.
Yeah. Okay.
Neil Stevenson writes about this in Anathem.
So we've been talking about like the physical expression of Nightside, but what Auk is talking about is something not physical. It's psychological.
Yeah. Right.
Luminous.
When it's nighttime, you do things differently, and
The
oh
night
my
wave.
goodness, can I relate to that? I feel like at the night the all of the plans I make in my head when I'm going to sleep and thinking about what's happened over the day, that no matter how like great they are or specific, like reevaluating them upon waking up it seems like the work of another person. And it takes almost the whole day, I feel like, for me to get back into that state where I'm once again like thinking about what I should be doing in the way I was when I made my plans last night.
How often do you stay awake for 48 hours or more?
For 48 hours?
Yeah.
Never.
You should try it.
Okay.
With this in mind, with this dual personality in mind, I'd be interested for you to try it.
I mean, now's the time, right? If I'm gonna
Exactly. Fuck with yourself as much as you can now. There's no repercussions.
Very true.
Reality's off.
Oh no. I feel like that's not good to encourage Ryan this way, Connor.
Or it could be the best thing possible.
Who knows?
This just might be so crazy it'll work.
But so Auk is saying at nighttime basically is like the time for crime and
It's crime time.
doing it.
Well, it's like the I mean, there's definitely like an animus thing happening here, right? Like people can one of the other themes I think that runs through my highlights of this chapter that I guess we might get to is like the humaneness of polytheism, and I think that relates a little bit with this, that like people have contrary impulses and even have like diverging personalities within one person, and like day and night, something that we all experience every day, is so I feel like maybe seems like reason to be gentle to ourselves about this schism within self.
Yeah, totally.
I completely agree. I think there's a lot of like Jungian and Gestalt therapy psychology stuff going on in here, and we're just talking about the shadow. Right?
Yeah. And that plays out in monotheism versus polytheism in a pretty explicit way, where in like monotheism and in monotheistic psychology, like the whole goal is always to bring it all back into one and to eliminate contradictions. Whereas like in polytheism, the whole philosophy, whether you're talking about religion or psychology, is that people can, like, you do violence to a person by forcing them to be one thing that has no contradictions.
Absolutely. Yeah. Individuality. There's a certain tyranny to individuality, to the narrative that you must construct in your head to identify who you are and who you will always be and what your life is like. Like that certainly serves, the machinery of capitalism. I think that your life has this set course, that you are one person, which is bullshit. Your body regenerates itself. Your mind changes. Your surroundings change. The forces of nature surrounding you affect you, differently at different times, as you pointed out in your personal experience, Ryan. Yeah.
Just from a day to day, like not even to think about year to year.
Yeah, right, exactly.
I also think that there's a kind of tyranny in monotheism of perfection. Since there's only one God, that God is perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
In polytheism, there's lots of gods, so they're not perfect, and they like get made fun of, and they fuck up, and get thrown to earth and break their leg, and all sorts of stuff. And so so you're not held, you don't feel the pressure to be perfect because shit, God ain't perfect.
You learn a lot more from an imperfect deity than you do from a perfect one. A perfect
you
one
got to be afraid that they're going to
can
kill
only
you.
ever be this like ineffable, unknowable thing, because perfection is not something that's like
real.
It's interesting that in like Greek and Roman mythology, like humans can sometimes like can interact with gods and even like defy them and kind of influence gods back. It's a little side note. The fantasy author Steven Erikson, who's sort of like a complicated magical gene wolf, explores that concept really intensely. But anyway, I just, as a quick side note that just popped into my head, a really interesting story to write now would be about someone meeting and influencing, the Catholic God, and like if that's a real thing, and like defying it or fighting it, like in a literal kind of way, if that makes. Anyway, I'm just spitballing.
No, totally. Jacob too.
But that would be cool.
Somebody just takes shelter and wrestles God one night.
Yeah, like that happened in those
The Jews aren't Israel anymore. You're Israel now, guy.
Yeah.
There's a few little kind of not throwaway, but like really quick happening lines in this chapter that I feel like go along with this theme. Like when Silk says when he's falling, trying to get that rope and climb the wall. The first time he falls, I think he's like, "Pa, Skilla, take mercy on your little servant. Don't treat him so."
Mm-hmm.
Which is like a thing. It's like a polytheistic. You can't do that attitude really as well or as easily in monotheism as you can in polytheism, where you got this ability to bargain with gods and even bargain with different gods. Like when he talks in this chapter about how he's like, I'm going to ask Tartaros for help because I know I'm not supposed to, like, outsider tells me I can't get any help, but it doesn't technically maybe necessarily mean I can't ask Tartaros for some more help, so I'm going to. And then after that, like, little acrobatics, then he's like, but blood does crime, so maybe Tartaros likes him better. Ooh, and this whole like relationship where you can kind of arrange them it's so humane. It's like it, instead of being like infidel dies because they don't worship the right God, I'm good, always do good because I got the right one. You have a much more fluid and like realistic like situation with the forces going on here.
I would also argue that what you're describing is distinctly Catholic. And it's especially a Protestant's view of a Catholic.
Oh, fuck.
I've never seen it, honestly.
It's fun.
Jordan, where are you in Lost?
I'm at the beginning of the fourth season.
So gets bad.
It's when I just watched the season where you flash it forward to them getting off the island, but you don't know what happens to the other group yet. And I forget how it happened and how people get screwed up like they do. So I'm like, oh my god, I know what's gonna happen, but I don't know how. I'm like, what's gonna happen next? See, it always packs. It always gives you a little something. Even if you never play.
I'm excited to go back and watch it again. Welcome back,
It's
Brian.
really good.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had a browser freeze up.
Weird.
Are we on?
Yeah, I don't think the stream went down.
Oh, well.
I mean,
Oh,
well,
we
it went
just-
black, but it didn't stop.
In case you.
I did a side. Oh, you mean? I understand. The stream is still up, but it wasn't. But we weren't there.
It was a test pattern.
There was just
It was a
yeah,
test.
a black screen for a while.
But particularly, I think that it is a Protestant's view of a Catholic with indulgences, all the lawyerly getting out of sin, and then playing saints against each other.
Yeah,
That's
the
cool.
Saints rule.
I mean, all of these
Yeah,
are part of this like Protestant argument that Catholicism is
Idolatry.
idolatry and isn't true monotheism.
It
That's
is.
so
They're exactly right.
amazing.
Though I one time fought back against this woman who went to Assembly of God churches saying, you guys don't worship God, you're just worshiping a book about God.
Ah, ha, ha, ha.
And that itself is an idol that you've set up in defiance of the actual God. Because look, even if you guys think that this is the word of God, we're the ones who edited it. So then we're your God dudes.
But
God, dudes.
Later, she broke up with me because she was afraid that she loved me more than Jesus.
that's
Wow.
insane.
I told her I thought that was a good idea.
That's true.
Orab says a really good line to Silk that's like, "Man, God, my God,"
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That goes back to
and then Silk was like, and then Silk says, I think it says something to the effect of, "Shut up," his God said wearily. I love that. I was like, that is so cute.
yeah, it is.
We got to remember that Silk is 23.
23. Yeah, oh yeah. I remember that constantly, just as I constantly remembered how Severian is a teenager. Like, these guys are fucking...
Yeah.
If you met these guys in real life, they would annoy the shit out of you.
He's a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, 23-year-old.
Yeah, we don't want-
like Khan. He's basically Khan. He's genetically engineered to be a perfect fighter.
We'd be able to resist. We would love him. We'd be like, oh my God, he's so cute. Yes, he's here. He's
Love
calling.
this guy.
This is the coolest priest.
So happy.
He's a
We
cool
wouldn't
priest.
stop, no matter how much we hated it.
He's like those monks that you see playing soccer.
Shaolin soccer?
Oh, Dominican play a lot of soccer.
What?
Dominican monks play a lot of soccer, and it's really cute because they're just so
Uh,
active running around, but they're wearing monk outfits.
Going back to this like monotheism, polytheism idea and how it relates to the world. In this chapter, there's a part where Silk takes out kind of like a rosary. I guess it's part of the voided cross.
Oh yeah,
The image of it isn't precise in my mind, but it's on page 89 if anyone has the edition of the book on them. But it's
dudes.
and so it's got 9 what is it?
Decades.
9 decades. Okay. And then
Each
there's an
decade is 10 beads.
additional unspecified decade from which the voided cross was suspended. Like, is it possible that the outsider was initially like a part that was above these, that the other 9 gods kind of fed into, and that it was more of a monotheistic society at some point in the past? Could that 10th bead represent the outsider? I mean, Silk himself gives it a thought.
And it makes sense that Silk would think that. And I got a little thing here that I think is a very flimsy theory. I'd say that the god that we interact with maybe the most in this book is Kypris.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of think if the 10th decade was for somebody, it would be her.
Wait, but
Well,
she's
what if
God
it's
of love,
just
right?
an open?
I'm sorry. Say that again. One of you.
Kypris is reigns over love,
Right.
right?
It's technically,
And
yeah.
there's
His
definitely
yeah.
there's a Catholic like thing where Jesus and love are like inseparable, and so two sides of the same coin.
If I designed it, the 10th one that doesn't have a title would be for whoever, like how there's the list of the 9, and then when Silk is done, he'll have his 9. Okay, he's saying a prayer. He'll say all the 9, and then he'll just add people in. You know what I mean? I think it's probably, if I don't know, or not what it is, but what I would use it as if I were using it is like space for like whoever the fuck else you're adding in your prayer that day. Like, I think it's untitled for a reason.
Well, so in the
I don't see why it would be like one particular god.
Yeah.
Oh, because Paz is setting up the system and Kypris is Paz's girlfriend would be my only argument for that. I'm not standing on that.
So who does the voided cross represent, or is there an entity that is represented by the voided cross? Like, I mean, the cross in Christianity is clearly a symbol of Jesus, but
Father, Son,
Well, I
and
mean-
Holy Spirit.
what does the cross mean?
He refers to it as Paz's Gamadian, right? I mean,
Okay.
that's what Silk calls it, right?
Right.
Okay.
If that
I
means
read
anything.
an interesting thing on the Earth lists one time about the important part of the voided cross is the negative space in the middle,
Mhm.
Yeah, he talks about this on the same section right here.
which
Yeah, he
makes me
says it.
feel so outsidery.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, because he says like somebody told me that the space, the negative space, contained a mystery or something, or a secret.
Yeah.
I think he says.
Yeah.
I'm also
But
curious,
then he never expands on that.
Yeah. I'm also curious if this like rosary kind of thing has a connection to the Kabbalistic tree of life, because that's you've got the 9 Sephiroth and then Malkuth.
Well, the rosary has 10 decades, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And so the actual Catholic rosary has 10 decades.
Yeah. He's holding an actual Catholic rosary just with the voided cross instead of a crucifix hanging off the end.
That's
Right.
what it seems like.
I guess I'm curious if the cross represents something separate from the decades. Like, what do the decades represent in the rosary?
Oh,
Various
different
mysteries.
prayers.
Well, each deck, there's like so many sorrowful mysteries and so many joyful mysteries, and you're supposed to meditate on that particular mystery during that cycle of 10 Hail Marys.
Yeah. And
And
I
then
think
it
if
goes-
you want to do all the mysteries, you have to pray the entire rosary 3 times. Something
Oh,
like
is that right? Yeah, that's right. You got to run laps.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's crazy. You got to memorize a lot of little tiny things in order to do the rosary.
And then there's a thing called a novena that they used to sell, where if you really needed some heavy duty prayer, you would pay a whole monastery to pray the rosary over and over again for 9 days.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Probably big money for the monastery.
Much. How much do that cost?
I don't know. A
I don't
child,
This is how
They'll
the
need-
church
they'll
got.
need to get on
one
that grip.
principality.
I mean, the church got like all its money in the Middle Ages through weird things like this. Like when someone would go, like a nobleman goes on a crusade before he leaves, he would, and this could happen multiple times in a dude's life, where he would like put some money aside so that masses could be said in perpetuity for him and his family at a specific church. Like he'd like basically like will a income to a church so that there would always be priests there saying masses and like shouting out his family forever till the end of time.
And And the funny thing about that is that the MacArthurs did that to the Church of NPR.
Whoa.
Right.
Bam.
That's right.
And like Tiro Price.
Yes, they did.
NPR will always be praying for the MacArthurs for as long as NPR exists.
Was it
Yeah, I mean,
Catherine
that
T
makes me
and
think too of like any kind of like donor-based system where you like name a building or whatever. Like that's still, that still happens.
You see that name Meyerhoff all over the place.
Yeah.
Yes, you do.
Oh yeah.
Look into how they made their money.
Uh-oh.
Racist exploitation of real estate.
Mm-hmm.
it's slightly different to put your name on a thing that stays there and then to incorporate it into a ritual that must be performed over and over again.
Yeah.
The NPR thing, like they have to intone that formula of like, this is brought to you for, what is the Catherine T and
The John T. and Catherine C. MacArthur Foundation.
that is
That's right.
such a prayer.
Yeah.
And it's in every city all over the entire country. They have to say it several times an hour.
Oh yeah,
Man.
and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation too. Like
Well, the
yeah.
MacArthur especially, like I've been hearing that my entire life. Like I hadn't even thought about it really until now, but for my entire life, I've been hearing that on a regular. I mean, I listen to NPR less now than I did as a child, but
The MacArthur ghost is the person who's allowed to determine who geniuses are now.
right, yeah, the
The
genius.
MacArthur grant is the genius grant.
Yeah.
This ghost has determined you are a genius.
Yeah. Or the Nobel Prize.
Uh,
Or the Pulitzer.
mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Those are all
any,
families.
any of those.
Why
big
not there? Win the Olympics too.
Was it? Well, that's Zeus, right?
right.
Anyway,
That's
Anyways,
and so I guess that brings us to Blood buying this Mantian, which I kind of think that Silk fucks up big. I think I'm jumping ahead too. I'm going all the way to their negotiation. Maybe I should slow my roll.
That's fine.
No,
We can always
I think
go
it's
back.
a good transition to talk about Blood a little bit, and just as a really quick building off of what we were just talking about. I read this book recently called The Ghosts of Johns Hopkins, which talks about the history of the man Johns Hopkins or John Hopkins or whatever the hell his name is, and like how his legacy was built throughout Baltimore. And he was essentially like a liquor bootlegger.
Yeah.
As a young man who got involved in groceries and then the railroad, which is when the real money started coming in. But I mean, that's the history of like how people get rich in the United States. Is people like Blood. I guess rich anywhere really. It's people, mavericks, rule breakers,
Mm-hmm.
criminals.
So
Elon Blood.
Elon Blood.
Now it's a little bit different because we have like technocrats and stuff. But if you look back to the late 19th, early 20th century, I mean, it's just mostly just bootlegging and people getting involved in industry.
I find Blood lovable.
They're criminals. They're breaking laws all the time, every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, Johnson
Oh.
& Johnson is on some crazy shit. They're like,
Oh yeah, Johnson & Johnson got in big trouble recently for something, didn't they?
I mean, when they get in big trouble, it's like, we're gonna make you pay $10 million, which is they make in 1 second, And they're like, oh,
Yeah, they-
God,
Well,
you got
and
us.
then they-
Oh.
And then they negotiate that number down, whatever
Yeah.
that number is.
Yeah.
Oh, and speaking of negotiation, so like the thing about Blood, why does he buy the Mantian? Ostensibly just to get back at his mom for giving him up.
Yeah.
So what does he intend to do with the Mantian?
Yeah,
I would posit nothing. So when Silk
Yeah.
goes to say, like, give me back my Mantian, like, I think he's just like, this is great.
Isn't he going to like tear it down and
for my
rebuild?
mom that I own her house? Like, sure, yeah, give me all this money for me to do the exact thing I was going to do anyhow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think he talks about tearing it down. I guess there's also precedent for him turning a Mantian into a brothel.
There is precedent.
True.
But I think that Blood just wants his mom to, like, I think he loves his mom and he just wants his mom to be like, I love you too. I didn't mean to beat you up.
You think, okay, so you're saying, Connor, that you think that his intentions are perhaps better than we're given to
I think
let
so.
them believe.
I kind of feel for Blood.
He kind of
Blood may not be admitting to himself that of why he's doing this and what it's for. You know, that there's like that. There's just this drive. I got to do something connected to my mom, and I'm not going to think too much about whether I'm doing something good or bad. I just got to do this thing.
Yeah. And
so something about Blood is I noted that, like, because names are so important in this book, and it seems like, yeah, so he has all of this. The description of his building when he's going into it is full of rose imagery, and like, I think Auk mentioned that Blood wears rose musk, or like musk rose perfume all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like his mother and his like the dude thing. And,
his lover.
His lover.
His lover. Yeah. His mother and his lover, yeah. And then he had his fountains are like scented with rose, and I think there's roses in his hallway, and like they're everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's obsessed.
Yeah.
He's like obsessed.
I also think that Blood is an irrationally and unrealistically pure figure in some ways, especially given that he is a criminal overlord. And I think that all of the bad qualities of Blood are drained out into Musk. Musk is kind of like unreasonably vile.
Yeah.
And I think they kind of go together to make one realistic person.
There's a wild
and how
in
does
chapter 4
and how does and how and as long as we're on that, like how, like what's up, like how does Horn? I feel like we haven't talked about Horn yet this round, and like we always have to fucking talk about Horn now.
No, I think that I think this is exactly where we talk about Horn.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we, because on one level I'm like, how can I think that Blood is pure when you know he's a criminal fucking mastermind and clearly supposed to be this scary person? And it's like, oh, it's because this is not at any point supposed to be real.
Right.
This is a kid writing down what he remembers of a story that he thinks is going to be an important thing for years to come. So Blood is a weird caricature and can have these completely contradictory qualities.
And he's also the son of Horn's teacher.
Right. Horn's teacher that he respects now, but hated and was horrified by at the time.
Yeah.
Who looks frightening.
Yeah.
I read something about where Silk is talking about Rose. And he's always been polite to her, but then for one moment he slips and describes her as this, like, I wonder if it's talking about her frowning at him at some point. And it's just the mechanical side of her mouth that frowns. And he's like, I wonder if in that disease-ridden thing, the original person is even alive still, or if it's just a machine.
Brutal.
And yeah, you got to think, that's Horn talking. And I think that Silk is thinking that during the scene where Rose is like, I caught Horn making fun of you, and you got to go punish him now.
Oh yeah.
Right.
and Maytera, Mint, and Silk are both kind of like, what the fuck, Rose? This is not a big deal.
Oh yeah. Also, I guess when Silk has that moment where and this is not in our section, but when I've already talked about it, so fuck it. When Silk has that moment where he's like, "There's two Silks now." The thing that makes him do that is that he's coming back from this late night being out with Blood, and Horn is waiting to get reprimanded, and Horn is sitting in his chair inside of his house, imitating Silk to Aura.
Uh-huh. That's right.
And Silk hears that from outside, and he's like, "Is that me in there?" He's just like, "What?" And then Silk's like, "Oh, there's two of me now," and the other one is Horn.
Oh shit! Oh my god!
And Silk's like, "I'm the Night Silk now." Like he's like, "I'm the Night Silk, and that's my old self in there talking."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, his ideal self lives on in Horn. Oh man, and that becomes increasingly crazier and more awesome as we read.
I really loved that moment. I just loved that moment.
Yeah.
There's a lot in there.
Oh,
But
can we
that's
go
okay.
back
So like, Horn is the thing. Horn is the thing that you have to remember is under you.
Mm-hmm.
This is so
like the Silk.
I'm gonna say that
like,
Horn is in the part of the
remember.
Gamodion.
What?
Horn is the secret in the heart of the of Pas's Gamodion.
Ooh, yeah. There we go.
Or to abstract that, it's ego. You are in the middle of it.
It's a shape.
Yeah, solved it.
It's a shape formed by what's around it. It's a shape formed by like the boundaries imposed upon it. It's not a thing you see and can grab. It's a thing you see because you see that it's not there. You know, you can't look right at it. You have to look at the other thing.
It's the window.
Yeah.
Oh, the window that Mukor is able to travel through.
It's the window you can see in. That's like your window that you can understand.
Yeah. It frames it's the shape of what you see.
What's the German word? Weltaufschlag or something like that? Your world tunnel?
Oh. World tunnel, yeah.
But what is the German word, Jen?
Oh, I don't know.
Weltanschwang?
Weltaufschlag or something like that?
I mean, Welt is world.
Right.
Weltischlang?
But what's Aufschlag?
Welty Schlong.
Aufschlag?
Weltischlang.
You said schlong.
Can we talk about Musk some more? I feel like there was.
I'd like to.
We got last week. You know, we got to the end with the striving and the call. It was like 3 hours into the meeting. I feel like we went by really fast. But I was glad that that there was some Musk in this chapter, so we can go back to what I imagine will be something we're going to return to as we read this book.
Where do we see Musk in this chapter?
Well, there's this towards the beginning. There's this bit where Silk says, or the book says, unbidden and unwanted, Musk's features rose from Silk's memory, perfect yet corrupt, like the face of a devil. That's how it's in this chapter. It's him remembering that Musk, and I feel like encapsulating the greater part of Musk as he relates to Silk is like this demon, this symbol of a person who will kill, and who, it doesn't resemble really a human inside. And these are our gay guys in this book.
It makes me think about Disney a lot. Jafar.
Who's
Oh,
Jafar's
Welt
lover?
Anschauung.
What was that?
Weltanschauung.
Yeah.
It means worldview.
Yeah.
Who's Jafar's lover?
Jafar doesn't have a lover, but like there's a common, there's a thing. Jake B actually was the first person to talk to me about this, of in pop culture and Disney's where we see it, where we would experience it the most, that gay people are the bad guy, and you see that with Ursula, and you see it with Jafar, and you see it with Scar. They're played kind of fey.
Yeah, and they're also well spoken. You know, they're like the most articulate characters in the whole films are always the villains. You know, they're always like using the biggest words and like having the most elaborate schemes. They're always thinking the most. You know, they're always
Perfect,
putting
yet
the most
corrupt.
thought into things.
Yeah.
And
Well,
okay.
John Dee was thrown into prison for calculating.
Who?
John Dee,
Who
Queen
that?
Elizabeth's court magician.
Ah.
Oh.
Who was probably lovers with what's his name? Edward, his other dude.
Edward Kelly.
Yeah, they were probably lovers.
I don't think so, because he got really upset when they wife swapped.
Well, that might make sense if he thought that the guy was more interested in the wife than in him.
It might make more sense.
I don't know. I think that Edward Kelly got them to fuck for sure, saying that he had sex with John Dee. I don't think that John Dee I think that John Dee was ruined by Edward Kelly.
Yeah, a lot of people think that Edward Kelly was just a con man taking John Dee for a ride.
Yeah, I think that too.
Is that what's going on
I
with
mean, I
Musk and
think they
Blood?
were all wizards, but I think that he was an evil wizard conning an actual good wizard.
Wait, are Blood and Musk are lovers?
Mm-hmm.
It's understood,
Oh, okay.
if not explicitly stated.
Somebody
Okay.
says that that Musk doesn't really like blood, but I can't remember who says it. I think it happened early on. I think I read it recently. But I can't imagine, maybe Mukor says that? Would she know? I don't know. I feel like someone told that explicitly, but it might not.
Mukor's Musk kind of acts as Mukor's mom. That's a fun thing to say.
Oh, well, because Musk likes animals.
Musk is Mukor's mom.
Musk kind of acts as Mukor's mom.
Yeah,
Mukor's mom.
yeah.
Because their names make them into a family. They're Blood, Mucus, and Musk all together. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, just like you can kind of trace Tussa's lineage through names to a degree.
But then how does Rose fit in? Because she does fit in, right?
Rose and Blood share a color.
Oh, of course. Yeah, of course Rose and Blood go together. What the fuck?
Yeah.
Come
And
on.
also, roses have thorns which draw your blood out. Thorny old rose is going to make you bleed.
Thorny old Rose. She's gonna make you bleed. Oh man, those should be our Wolfe pack shirts.
The tagline for this episode.
Yeah. Thorny old blood. Wait, thorny old blood, thorny old Rose.
Yeah.
Sorry, I already ruined it. I don't even remember it.
And then also the Fae character is musk, which is used to make perfume and be all, and it comes from Persia, from this Oriental deer kind of thing. It's a which Greeks, the classic bad guys, are the people from the Orient because they have all these jewels and they're always fancy smelling and all of that stuff, and the Greeks think that sucks. They're like, we're pure simple people. They have all those fanceries. So it further puts Musk in the role of a classic villain.
It's interesting that, I'm still thinking about this, Jafar and Scar and stuff, and how, from one perspective, this is like a homophobic thing, but from another perspective, if you're an actor, those are the roles you want in any story. Like in any story, the best role to have is the evil, effeminate villain, or Ursula.
Yep.
Well, so the counter argument to it's homophobic to make the bad guys gay is that no. Look back to Shakespearean times. It was criminal to be gay. It was an actual criminal thing, and therefore, gays were the homosexual community. They were criminals.
Mm-hmm.
They hung out where the criminals hung out because they were doing a criminal thing, and so they were fucking tough. You didn't think of a gay person as some wilting little lily, that
Right.
oh,
It's more of a Jean Genet kind of character.
I would say I'm going to go beat up the queers because the queers are going to kill you.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
tough, scary people.
Yeah,
And
or like
that's what-
sailors and yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I mean, it's also, if you're going back to like Disney of the 50s and 60s or Hollywood of that same era, you know, it's well documented that the writers were oftentimes homosexuals themselves. That was, and that you see little like supposedly like coded messages if you go back and kind of analyze these films, or like coded instances of homosexuality. And then it's feasible to think of the writers. I don't know if this is true or not, but the writers or the producers and artists in Disney films of that time as actually being homosexuals themselves. Now, why they would code the villains as homosexual, you know, that may or may not be true. I mean, that might have just been like
I think
some
Ryan has a
subtext
point.
that kind of came through them. Sorry?
I think Ryan has a point where, like, in most stories, the cool character is the bad guy.
Yeah.
You know?
And the
Yeah,
most
One-
fun to portray.
Just so that everybody can mark off their bingo cards. One of the big problems about Marvel movies is that the bad guys aren't as good as they should be.
They're not as good.
Yeah,
Good point. That's
in most comic books, the bad guys are fucking awesome. Batman's bad guys are why those stories are. The Marvel movies have nonce bad guys that are killed at the end. Who gives a shit?
Or the Transformers, you know, like in the Transformers, only the Decepticons are cool. Like no one cares about the Autobots. Autobots are stupid.
Heroes are a blank character that you can read yourself onto, and bad guys are iconic people that are awesome. I also have the theory that heroes are people who try to keep the status quo from changing, and bad guys are activists that want to better the world.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Boom.
And that's very evident in our use of heroes today. You know, and I guess that's a big one of Alan Moore's real. I feel like Access to Grind is like pointing out how significant it is when James Bond, when heroes start becoming synonymous with agents of the state stopping crime, and how huge that is for the human psyche.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, that the Black Dossier is an amazing look at exactly that. Totally.
Yeah, I mean, boomer action movies are all about just, thwarting Chinese and Russian political agendas, which were largely just about creating sustainable societies.
Yeah, and then
And we're going to stop them in 24 hours.
Yeah, and in like Homeland and stuff, and Jack Ryan. I mean, it continues. I feel like those type of movies of the last decade have even, you know, like, despite all of the nuance, I feel like that has kind of been brought like to light post 9/11. Like, still those things like Homeland and Jack Ryan are so much more propagandistic than, you know, than any. Before,
Sorry, you're kind of breaking out here.
Oh, they're I don't know, just that the things of that whole genre, the whole genre of like excitement with a gun, continues to be completely wrapped around the idea that the agents of the state are the people who can stop bad from happening, and their enemies are threats to us.
This is why the Fast and the Furious movies are the best, because every time there's a cop in one of those movies, they end up siding with the cool car-based superheroes who are just out to make money and like save their kids and like preserve their family or whatever.
Very true. It's very
I would like to bring Mission Impossible into this.
Oh, no.
You have a government agent who is constantly having to fight his own agency to correct it. Like,
that's like an extension of
even when
noir.
the bad guy is the government, the only person who can save you from the government is the one good part of the government.
Yeah, that's like a whole archetype too.
Yeah.
Fighting within
because the only way you can change a system is from inside it with incremental change.
Right.
Mission Impossible.
Yeah.
Mission
also
Mission Impossible, incremental change.
Right?
There's like a neoliberal theme to Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, where like that's the white savior. He's rescuing this like remote, exotic town. Like so you get to see that like aspect of like neoliberal fantasy. Whereas like the first Indiana Jones movie, he was more of like robbing or disrupting and exploring exotic cultures. At least like as his job. Like that's what Indiana Jones represented in that movie, was someone who found artifacts and basically put them in museums.
Right. It belongs in a museum.
Yeah.
Rather than with these people whom it belongs.
Yeah.
Well,
here. But yeah, we don't see a lot of that too much. Silk is like a different hero altogether. Silk is the opposite of Sev in a lot of ways, because Sev was cautiously heroic and really kind of thrust into heroic situations, at best against his will. I'm thinking of him fighting the El Zabo, or him in that close to that section where he's witnessing the family, getting jumped by savages. Where are they, like autochthons or whatever? But we see Silk is the inverse of that a little bit. Silk is sort of, as we've talked about before, sort of foolishly heroic. At least the way he's portrayed in this story by Horn. Just like diving into each situation.
But there's another quote in this chapter at the beginning that I feel like hits right on this distinction you're talking about, Tim. For whatever inscrutable reasons, the gods thrust bios into the world knowing nothing of it. And if they waited until they were so wise as to make no mistakes before they acted, they waited forever.
Yeah.
Silk is also naturally heroic. He was born, designed, and bred to be heroic, whereas Severian is not. Like Severian described his story early on as, this is how I found myself inadvertently backing into the throne.
Yeah.
Whereas Silk was hand selected by the king to be his ordained weapon.
Right. Like, he's been engineered.
What Silk was born for.
Yeah.
I mean, doesn't the autarch, following Severian at the, House Azure and stuff, doesn't that kind of indicate a selection kind of thing too? It
does, but that it's a selection from the lowest, like Severian.
Yeah.
Severian sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And he also wasn't like literally born from a fucking frozen embryo that was,
And also
like,
fails constantly. Like the first thing that happens in Severian's story is that he dies, and we have to start over again.
Yeah.
Like Silk. Silk doesn't fail ever. When Silk doesn't do what he was intending to do, he fails upward. Silk only fails up.
Is there something is there a connection here between Severian telling his own story? Like telling your own story, there's going to be this tendency to put yourself at the bottom to begin with, as I've come so far. And then when Horn tells Silk's story, there's the opposite tendency to be like, of course this guy was going to succeed.
Whole time.
He was made that he did these amazing things because he was made to do amazing things. And the proof is that he did them.
Well, I do think that in telling your own story, you're going to say, I'm a normal guy. And telling the story of somebody that you admire, you're going to be like, he was never normal. I think that totally makes sense. I got to go to the bathroom. I'll be right back.
Bye, Connor.
Goodbye, Connor.
Bye.
You could just take the laptop with you into the bathroom.
That's gross.
Hey,
Yeah, I
guys.
did that earlier.
Hey, guys.
I thought you were doing that, Mark, but I didn't say anything.
Trying to be subtle about it. Just,
I think you did a good job. It was like, you signaled to those who know, but we didn't have to make a big deal about it.
Yeah.
And now to those, who want to go back and relive that moment, they can go find it in the
That moment where I can
forever documented on YouTube.
Yeah, the second time they read it, they'll be like, "Whoa! Look at what I know now."
Mark was pooping that whole time. Oh man.
Totally changes how I read that episode.
Something that I thought we should do today is I took there's 2 paragraphs of Auk talking to Silk on their walk about I guess it's about when he messed up on the break-in, and I wanted everyone in the group to read those 2 paragraphs and what they think Auk's voice sounds like when he's talking in the slang.
Oh man, we gotta. Oh yeah, I've been thinking about all this slang too.
Yeah, I want to hear I kind of want to hear everyone read these paragraphs. I guess I should have found out what page they are in the real physical book, but I think that they start with. There's one where he's like, if I was to flush his fussock, and then the next 2 paragraphs after that.
Wait, what the hell are we talking about?
Lily plum. What are other words they?
Denver.
Denver, yeah. It's
Um,
kind of like, who's the Clockwork Orange guy? Anthony Burgess, maybe.
Yeah.
That book had its own whole lived-in language system, and I
Nazi.
feel like Wolfe. And again, this is just a testament to Wolfe's world building. Is that he has the different dialects, of the different classes set up here.
I love that one. Is it a prolocutor? Who's the dude who says, between every word?
Is that Remora?
Yeah,
yeah,
that voice is amazing.
Yeah, that is great.
I read that guy just as Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I'm reading that, I'm like, this guy is just talking like Jeff Goldblum.
Interest.
He
I won't
reminds
be able
me
to
of a
unthink
character
that
from
part.
Dune.
What?
There's a character in Dune that is constantly going between all of their words and extending vowels in weird ways, and then several chapters later you find out that that's a secret language. He's a spy, and that he's speaking in a coded language the whole time.
This is in the first Dune?
Yeah, it's in the beginning of the second book. He's in the Harkonnen court spying for the Emperor.
Oh.
Oh, cool.
He's got a wife. They're kind of like the Blackneys.
It's been a long time since I've read that.
I sort of remember.
Oh,
Yeah.
there are some of my favorite. The whole concept of I'm talking to someone and just in my I can be having a secret communication with someone else, commenting on the things that I'm saying and whatnot. I think that sounds amazing.
Yeah, it does.
Language and doing is a crazy thing. But anyways,
Well, the Bene Gesserit do it with their little hand stuff, right?
and that's the Atreides battle language.
Right.
But anyway, there's an appendix about all the languages in Long Sun in the companion volume.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to list all of those slang words, Abram, and all of that.
Fenring, Joseph has interjected. Fenring is introduced in the first book during the Harkonnen arena section.
Yeah, exactly. He's kind of one of my favorite characters in that book.
Last night when I was reading this, rereading this chapter, I was imagining Rainn Wilson as Silk
From The Office?
from 6 Feet Under.
He was in
Who was
60.
that?
Rainn Wilson, he's also in The Office.
I don't
Oh,
watch.
okay, that is a
Who
guy.
is he in 6 Feet Under?
He is Arthur, the dude who I think in maybe the second or third season comes in to help and falls in love with Ruth, and they have a weird thing where they don't actually kiss, and then he leaves when she starts being with George.
I didn't watch. I've only watched 1.5 seasons of it.
Oh, you should watch it all, man. It's
It's
incredible.
so good. It's
It's
wonderful.
out of this world.
Excellent.
This guy.
That guy, yes.
Him?
Yeah, that's my Silk in my head now.
That's really funny to me.
All right.
Yeah,
I
that
picture
makes
Paul
sense.
Newman.
I feel like he could like this chapter in particular, the falling and the there's something I feel like Rainn could really pull off if there was a Hollywood version of Long Sun. I mean, he'd have
He'd
to
be way
wear
too old
prosthetic
now.
young person makeup, but
Yeah.
I feel like his performance would be a good Silk.
That's cool.
Yeah, like, I mean,
What
he does
about
like
what about the who's the blonde of the Wilson brothers?
Luke?
Owen.
Owen?
Yeah, what about him?
He would be a
That guy's
very
awesome.
funny Silk.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like constantly like amazed and bewildered.
Oh.
Wow!
we just watched
Wow!
we just watched Zoolander the other day, which Kenny had never seen,
Oh my god, Zoolander's so good.
and now Kenny talks about Hansel a lot.
I can picture Owen Wilson doing a very good, like, walking around and kind of, well, should I be praying to Pos right now, or it's kind of dark outside? Maybe it's Tartarus that I should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a sort of stonery logic that Silk seems to delve into every now and then.
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
that.
Or if not stonery, at least laconic.
Yeah.
I think Silk probably looks like somebody actually that we know. So I don't know how interesting this will be to say on the internet. Like maybe he looks like Chester Glasgow. You know what I mean? Like
Oh, sure.
all about American. He obviously he's not American, but like that sunny like feeling. You know what I mean? He's like a
Yeah.
He grew up at Princeton.
yeah. You know, he's not a surfer, but like it's that kind of like idea of like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's sunny.
Sunny, exactly, and that's what I think when someone's blonde. I feel like that's kind of like what you're supposed to get from a character is that their presence is supposed to be like.
I feel like that goes in line with me saying that I picture Paul Newman as Silk.
Oh,
He looks like Paul Newman.
yeah.
Way to go, Chester.
If I had to pick a local person to be in the movie version, I would definitely make Martin Casey Silk. I feel like Martin Casey could do perfect.
You gotta bleach him. You gotta bleach him blonde.
Yeah, blonde hair. But
Blonde Martin Casey would be
That would be fantastic.
a trip.
I'm ready for it. I gotta say.
Yeah.
And then he
I'm
has to
prepared.
dress up like Father Guido Sarducci.
yeah, it'd be great. And he's all tall and willowy, you know.
I like it. I like
But
it.
can he sword fight really good?
He can sword fight really good.
What?
Martin can sword fight.
No. Can he? That's the problem.
Oh, that is the.
You've seen him dance?
then-
Doesn't he have a very odd way of moving?
I like
So then
watching
do we
Martin dance for sure.
He's one of the best dancers, I think.
He's really good.
So then
Now
do we
picture
get
with a sword in his hand.
Aaron for Ock?
I think so.
He might not
I
be
think
tall.
Vronsky has
He's
to be
not
off.
tall enough though, but he would be good in general.
Yeah, they're very close in personality, I think.
He has the presence for sure.
Mm-hmm. Who's going to be naked the whole time?
Because Ock is like a benevolent, tough guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is Ronsky for sure.
Yeah, who's secretly religious.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, a benevolent tough guy with secret religion. Yeah.
I mean, I can so...
The Zionist.
Yeah, this chapter, I can, like, with just the way... And I already said this in one of our other things. Like, the way that Ock's like, all right, I'm going to help you. You're going to fail. I'm going to see you later after you fail. Like, here's how it goes. Like, all of that, I feel like, is so Ronsky. I could just easily see... You know, that sense of guilt is such a thing.
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
In this chapter, right? This is the chapter where when they're walking with the donkeys, where Silk's like, I know you, and I know that you're just clearly a person that will feel bad about doing something wrong, so I know what you're going to do. You're going to do what's right.
That Ock gives Silk donkeys is also an interesting thing in that if we look at Silk as Osiris, the ruler that everybody's going to follow and love, and then look at Ock as Set, who was the older god that was worshipped before Osiris, that like gets cast as this villain that tries to steal it from him. So you have like the white god that is outwardly worshipped by the status quo, and then you have the secret dark god that is the one that has the secret truths to it. There's an interesting thing between those two.
The biological son.
Right, the biological son who should inherit. This also is kind of a biblical thing, where like all throughout Genesis, you see the older son who's supposed to be the person who inherits stuff is not the patriarch. It's always the younger son who steals his inheritance through cleverness. This is that story, but with a pure. I mean, I guess the Bible kind of paints all those patriarchs as pure, wide-eyed people too, to a degree.
Well, doesn't
Maybe.
Solomon like have like a long spate of being like licentious and heretical?
And a pagan,
Yeah. I feel like they got that.
building a giant temple with demons.
Yeah, I feel like they've got that. There's the biblical archetype of the patriarch that is like wildly problematic.
But Solomon's not a patriarch. Solomon's a king.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I'm conflating those things. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm talking just Genesis right now. So it's
Okay.
like Jacob and sons. Yeah, Jacob, the one that wrestled God, and Joseph, the guy who's just like, I just want to help my brothers out, and then they sell him to Egypt.
Oh.
But he did have that really dope coat. So, you know, how else were they going to get it?
Which allowed him to fall ass backwards into the throne.
Has anyone read Thomas Mann's Joseph and His Brothers?
No.
I started it. I will one day finish it. It seems kind of like an intensely more somber approach to some of the same stuff Wolfe goes at. There's definitely Kabbalah like out the ears in the beginning of that Joseph and His Brothers story.
I mean, Thomas Mann's pretty down.
Yeah, I think the only thing I've read by him is the one about the con man, but it was so amazingly good that I bought Joseph and His Brothers, and when I started it, I was like, this is very heavy. I need to be in a slightly different headspace.
I think it's
Holy Mountain?
directly like magical book is the Mountain.
Magic Mountain.
Yeah.
That's the first one, I think, that he wrote, right? No, Buddenbrooks is the first one, which is like the decline of an aristocratic family over several generations that I think is supposed to be funny.
Guys, books are so cool.
They
What's
are.
every-
There's so many of them.
Yeah.
So many I need to
Love
read.
I like books. I like books. You're not into books, Jen?
I'm just kidding. I love books.
Yeah, books.
Books suck.
Hey, if you like books, mention it in the chat. Tell us if you like books.
If you're into
Tell us a
books,
book you like.
If you like books, like and subscribe.
Hey, if you put a book on the floor right now, Conrad would sit on it.
Nice. Even cats like books. Our rabbits eat books.
Cool.
No, that's bad.
That's how they get the knowledge.
That's right.
Smartest rabbits there are.
More direct.
Melon's eaten a couple of books in her time.
Oh.
Yeah.
You got a real eaty dog.
Yeah, she eats a lot of stuff.
Loves chocolate.
Melon.
Yeah, loves chocolate, loves xylitol gum.
Ooh.
Yeah.
One time ate like 4 whole avocados with the pits.
Melon.
Yeah, she's a mouth with a dog attached to it.
Ate a whole avocado?
Yeah, like 4 of them.
Oh, Melon, she is lucky she did.
Fucking A.
Yeah,
Did
she's
she
very
poop out?
What?
Did she poop out the pit?
Yeah, I think she ate the pits. Yeah, we had to take her to the vet and get her stomach pumped. So
Oh.
Damn.
She was
Yeah,
backstage
that's
with Marilyn
there's
Manson.
no way. There's no way she should.
I don't know. Yeah. Well, she ended up okay, so she's getting belly rub now.
It all worked out in the end.
Good little puppers. Can't wait to do it again.
Well, we got pet insurance, so that I think that was very helpful also.
I have a question about this line.
Mhm.
Auk fell silent and Silk asked, what was the detail you overlooked? Debt, Patera. That don't go with blood because it's not him you got to worry about. What
Yeah.
It's been a while since I've read this whole entire book before. What is the debt?
What was the detail you overlooked?
Wasn't he saying? Wasn't the story? I can't remember, but wasn't the story he was at like the end? That's at the tail end of Ock telling him about the one time he got busted.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And he was saying, I could go back and read it, but I feel like my memory of it is that he was saying like, well, I showed up on such a night because I figured he'd be drunk, but he wasn't because he owed somebody a bunch of money or something. Like the guy who he went to rob.
Yeah, that's immediately after.
Didn't get a bottle that night because he had owed somebody a bunch of money or something, and so he was sober. And so when he went and broke in, he woke him up or something, something like that.
Could actually, this is the part I want to read. Connor, can you find this part in your book? The two long paragraphs after the debt part. That's what I want to hear people read.
That's on page 79 for anyone who's looking.
There we go.
Yeah, the Well Patero, this bucko. That's the story that Jen's talking about. This is the one I want people to read out loud.
You want it read out loud?
I want to hear what you think Ock sounds like, Connor.
I don't know what Ock sounds like.
And
on page 79, where?
Just wing it.
Bottom of 79.
Well Patero, this bucko.
Oh man, see, I'm not gonna do exactly what I think he sounds like because I think that he has a Cockney accent, and I don't do Cockney accent.
Yeah, he sounds like Ray Winstone in my head.
Who's Ray Winstone?
He was in
British.
Sexy Beast.
Okay, yeah, sure. I think of him. I think of him as a Danny Dyer kind of character.
Mm.
I got him more like a Brooklyn, New Jersey kind of accent.
I'm not doing that.
Read the part. If I was to flush his fussock down to the end of there.
Rouse up his
I
wife.
was to flush his fussock, rouse up his wife, Patera. She'd stave a broom getting him off straw, and I'd beat the hoof to my own tune. Only he'd owed him, you see, up to Ermine's. Them and holding his lower back on him so he was straight up or nearly. So he napped me, and I owed him.
Right.
So it's Michael Caine in your head.
He was sober because he had too much of a debt at the bar, and they wouldn't give him the booze or whatever.
Right.
Now you tonight, Patera, do that paragraph now. Somebody else can do it. Who else? Connor, you pick someone to read it.
I'm not picking someone.
Yeah, who do you want to hear talk like Ock?
Talk like Ock.
Talk like Ock.
I mean, Tim's the other guy that does voices and shit, right?
Yeah, Tim, let's hear it.
I feel so woefully unprepared for this.
I just did it. I was woefully unprepared, and I don't do voices.
Yeah, but you're better at voices than I am.
I would beg to differ, Tim.
All right. Now you tonight, Patera, you're going the same thing. You're not Flash. You don't know who's there or who ain't, or how big the rooms might be, or what kind of windows. Not a pip of the scavy you got to have right in your hands.
You got a New Jersey guy, a cop.
Yeah. Yeah, that's how I hear him a little bit more like that.
That's cool. Oh, well, now that's on the internet.
Well, what does Gene Wolfe... I'm trying to imagine Gene Wolfe writing this, and, like, what does Ock sound like in Gene Wolfe's head? Like...
I mean, he's such a Fagin. The cant, the whole cant makes me feel like he's thinking of Fagin. There's no way
Cockney. So he's Cockney.
I feel that has to be the case. Like Lily, they do rhyme slang often, I believe.
Yeah, I think it would make sense if it. I mean, it's definitely got a Cockney vibe.
Yeah.
How'd you like that, boy? Cockney urine all in your face. That was a bad time for you, wasn't it, boy?
Urinal.
No,
You're right.
you tonight, Patera. You're doing the same thing. You're not flesh. I'm trying
I've
to do
been-
Noel Fielding doing Cockney.
So see, I'm really into Mickey Flanagan right now. I don't find his stand-up that funny, but I love watching him talk, and I love the bits where he explains Cockney culture. Like, this is how a Cockney man moves and why. It's really
Gray, curly, floppy hair, nice Irish guy.
right.
Yeah.
He was paired with Mel B one time on Big Fat Quiz.
He saves Big Fat Quiz occasionally. I feel like in one of the most recent ones he did this, where he was paired with somebody weird, and it was the only reason the show worked is because he like was so nice and accommodating, making that weird person work in the. Man, I love.
I think he's amazing. I really love watching him. His performances are always great. He has this one great thing where he's like, so let's all just admit it. I've made a bunch of money, but my comedy is all based around me being a common person like you. So my agent told me that's going to be a problem, and I said I'd take care of it. So look it, pretend I'm still like you. With his routine. He's like, just keep in mind that when I say, like, I'm riding the bus, I wasn't riding the bus. I love him. He's great. Check him out on YouTube, Mickey Flanagan. He's probably over here in your recommended videos.
Yeah, you think YouTube's already tossed up a Mickey Flanagan video?
Yeah.
It might.
Not a pip of the scavy you got to have right in your hand. It's a interesting choice to go there in your.
Is any of this based off of like actual like Cockney dialects or anything, or is this sort of like made up specifically for this world? Like terms like lily and plum and
that.
Well, lily just means like the truth, right?
yeah,
Like,
in this book.
give
But does
someone
that
a
mean
little-
it? Does that mean that in this world too?
I don't know if that has any basis. And then flash just means like you got money, right? You've got cash.
Oh, I thought it meant you had knowledge, that you were aware
Yeah,
of something.
Flash-grown man had no frets. Slang, knowing, wide awake, smart, or fly.
Oh, okay.
To the Oxford English Dictionary.
Oh, okay. So that is
Yeah.
a term. All right.
They're all terms. They're all. He didn't make up any of these slang terms. They
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was curious about.
They occasionally.
Yeah.
So Joseph, also says that a lot of the cant is from the real world, like dimber mort, being a pretty woman. That's a strange sound for a term for pretty woman.
Dimber,
I could never figure out what they meant by dimber. Like Ock says that every now and then. I have no idea what it means.
Joseph says it means pretty.
No, it's skilled or cunning. A dimber woman is a woman who is good at being a woman.
Good at being a woman. So cunning.
Yeah, skilled or cunning.
My neighborhood is full of Caucasian people right now. It's very unusual.
Like from the Caucasus?
No, like white people.
White.
What are they doing? Are they up
I
to
don't know. They're
something?
carrying around boxes. They're like all over the place with boxes of stuff.
Tim's coming out with all these like old school descriptors today, like Caucasian and homosexual.
What? What do you mean
They're
old
just like
school?
old words people don't use really anymore.
Yeah, this is a
That's
Gene
how
Wolfe
Wolfe
club.
works.
Yeah.
A little dated.
I am just wandering around through the little dictionary of slang they have in here, and I've discovered, I didn't notice this ever before, that only the robots have an exclamation or mild oath, which is "Holy corrosion!" And I think that's great.
Oh yeah, Silk doesn't even really use any, right? Does he?
Now, actually, to go back to the actual selection we read for today, sometime when he first gets halfway up the wall and then falls off, I felt like he said "pass."
Yeah, he does.
If he says "fuck," he hurts himself, and he's like "pass," and I think that's a swear.
Yeah, he does that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And after that, I thought about what a good and satisfying swear "pass" is. It's got all the elements that I want.
A hard consonant.
Yeah, very percussive consonant, a full, long, meaty vowel. It's not I hate all the swears. Dick, I hate that one.
And also, like, Haas, that's the name of God. So you're like, when you're like mad and you're like, fuck God, you know?
Well, it's like when you're like, Jesus Christ.
Exactly. Exactly.
I found that my exclamations have changed. I feel like my exclamations of that sort have changed a lot since I haven't been leaving the house or seeing other people and stuff. Like I always I don't know how exactly the process happened, but like my pos now is balls. I find myself like if I stub my toe or like drop something, I find myself instinctually shouting balls. It sounds a lot like pos.
It's pretty tame curse.
I think something, well, not favorite, but something that I find really funny is that like in southern, like in like the Italians, their swear is like "che cazzo," which is like "what the dick," or they'll say like "che cazzo vai," like "what the dick is going on," like "what the dick."
That is good.
And it's like the one. It's like the one everyone. It's like the main one.
I feel that I have two levels of cursing for pain, and one is where I talk about Jesus, and then when I hurt more than that, I talk about Mary.
I think I would say if you're talking about pain, I feel like I don't really know because I'm usually not in my wits if I'm going to curse about pain, but
exactly.
I feel like it's usually going to be like motherfucker.
Well,
there's a very good one that
dick is going on in my neighborhood right now, but there are all these white people taking all of this random crap out of someone's house and loading it into some SUV. It's so weird. I don't know what's happening.
There's a very good curse that Madison and I got from Southern people. I guess it's not really a curse, but you say "Christ on his throne."
Yeah.
That's good.
The other day, without thinking, I said "Jesus motherfucking Christ in his seeping wounds." And then I thought to myself, what am I in the Crusades right now?
I like "Seeping Wound."
Yeah.
It's like a death metal band.
Anyway.
That's good. We're all going to hell.
Yeah. Oh man, in the shower I was thinking, I was stoned, obviously, but I was like, I thought this was like the most profound thing I had ever thought, where I was like, nobody cares if you go to hell, it doesn't matter.
That's interesting.
Like, no one cares if you go to hell. Like,
Right.
I don't care if another person.
I want to put that on a t-shirt.
But no one cares if you go to hell.
No one cares if you go to hell.
It doesn't mean anything, but at the time I was like, yeah, man, it's cool.
It just feels so dark to say.
Yeah, it does. It's one of those, which are like so much better than anything else.
Yeah.
Like, from like The Crow, like if you were a kid who watched The Crow movie, and that's stuff that you would write in your diary or think about later.
Nobody cares if you go to hell.
Yeah.
I think wasn't there ancient heresy where people believed that hell was brought to earth so everyone could go to heaven when they died?
Oh, I've never heard of that. That sounds cool.
I'll have to look up. I have no recollection of where I read this, but I feel like that there at some point, Cathars times or whatever, one of those splinter Christian groups were like, Jesus brought hell to earth so that, we all at the end of our life when we died, would be done with hell and go to heaven.
hell is other people. In heaven, you just get to be alone.
Yeah.
Alone with God.
Heaven's a place where nothing ever happens.
That's right.
But that's because it exists outside of time. So happening can't happen outside of time.
Of course.
Oh, and Silk talks about that sometime, and there's a really paratemporal or something. They make up an awesome word for.
Oh yeah. When he's describing his enlightenment.
Yeah.
Born.
And that's a Wolfism. Wolfe makes that.
Yeah.
A paratime in which the god speaks to you, a moment outside of time. Or actually, it means around time. So paratime surrounds time and encapsulates it.
Speaking of superheroes, shortly after the part we were just talking about, after Ock leaves and Silk's trying to get on the wall, he gets superpowers by thinking about the dying man that he recently comforted. You know what I'm talking about?
I vaguely recall this.
In order to get up the wall, he has to continually try, even though he's failing, and it makes a lot of sense. And even at certain times, he's like, or at least once, he goes, I'm going to try one more time and then go. But he doesn't stick to that because he keeps thinking of the dying stableman who he had like brought the last rites to, and the dying stableman's last words were, I tried, Patera, I tried. And because Silk knows about this dude and has encountered like a dying man and a dying poor man, he's able to say, I'm gonna keep trying at this wall. I feel like in essence he gets superpowers because he has encountered a poor dying man and he thinks about this guy. Like, it's in this chapter, this is the reason that Silk gets up the wall and doesn't turn around. Even after he says, I'm going to try one more time, and if I don't get it this time, I'm turning around. He breaks that little deal with himself because he can't let go of this idea of the old dying poor man saying, I tried, Vatera, I tried.
Right. That is interesting. I'm very excited about that. I also read a thing in the same thing that was pointing out that there is a glass in the ball court. It postulates that Silk's superpowers are actually turned on by his enlightenment. And this would be the first time they're used. But yeah, I like that it's connected with that I tried thing.
There a difference between enlightenment when you're dealing with like the actual the literal like screen time deity interaction thing? Is there a difference between enlightenment and possession?
Yeah.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I don't think anyone else in this book that we meet is enlightened. Many of them are possessed, but
I think that Pike becomes enlightened. I think that Jeroba is enlightened at some point.
Josie.
Like there's some ancillary enlightenments going on that are just mentioned, I think.
But like, here's my question, basically, or like thinking where I'm getting to is like, is it possession if it happens from one of the lower gods, but enlightenment if it happens from the outsider? Like,
no. Possession is when a god rides you, and you become that god, like you form that god's personality. And enlightenment is when they program your mind, from my understanding, that like you get it's kind of like getting a mission download, and at some point in the companion book they call it master program. So like Ock becomes enlightened in the fourth book, and then is able to repair a broken chem. sand. And that comes from his enlightenment. And like this is in the same school of thought that Silk's superpowers of being able to fight and being ultra charismatic are turned on by his enlightenment. Those are master programs that Mainframe can download into people.
Which brings us back to the red and the blue pill, doesn't it? It's kind of Matrix-y.
Totally.
Full circle.
What else do I have?
This is the chapter where we meet the Talus for the first time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Talus to me is like a character out of Yellow Submarine. It's like one of the blue mean machine things. It's like this war creature. It's like, what do you want?
Yeah, it reminded me of those like 80s, like the Beastmaster. Like it feels like it would come out of the Beastmaster, or
Dude,
like
I love 80s
like the
sword
80s,
and sorcery movies.
Masters of the Universe movie.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I definitely picture the head, and this is for no reason other than what this is the first image my mind threw up. Picture the head is looking very much like a Japanese oni sculptures.
I got that too. When it talks about the ogre, the specific words it uses. Yeah. I saw the same thing for some reason.
Yeah.
Looking
Although
that
also-
up. Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I also
Yeah, that makes
had
sense.
like a Thomas the Tank Engine.
Yeah.
Like Thomas the Tank Engine with a Japanese oni face on it.
Sure.
But
Hell
like
yeah.
that size and that relative to the rest of the body, for some reason, seems really Thomasy to me.
Very much so. Oh man, now I'm gonna watch all of those Freakazoid people dancing to the Thomas the Tank Engine song
Yes.
under the underpass.
What is that?
What?
Oh, somebody took a whole bunch of like Slipknot-looking fellows, and they're doing their kind of dancing. There's an overpass, and they're dancing underneath it. But somebody put the Thomas the Tank Engine music on top of it, so that's what they're dancing.
Nice.
It's really fun to watch.
Overpass raves. Those are going to be real big soon, huh?
Definitely.
Got to be outside.
Well, ravers all wear those gas masks anyway, so
That's true. They're already
Who
very.
knew?
they're all set.
I got my gas mask. I've been wearing a gas mask for years. I'm a raver.
I wore a gas mask before it was safety.
I love that raver voice. I'm a raver. I got a
There's a
gas
thin line
mask.
between
I'm a
raver and steampunk.
Oh man, now I'm thinking about that line. I love that line,
Well, I mean,
but I don't want to go.
I would say that the ravers are more closely akin to cybergoths.
Yeah.
Steampunk people, when they say have a party and call it a rave, it's like the thing that happens at the end of Comic-Con or like one of Otakon. It's like, yeah, I guess that's a rave.
Although, now that I'm thinking about it, I think that what the music at a steampunk rave would be the Thomas the Tank Engine music.
Yeah.
On a Calliope.
Perfect.
Yeah, Calliope.
Remix.
Calliopes are insanely loud.
Yeah.
It could
Yeah,
be
because they're
pretty
in the
tough.
middle of a merry-go-round. And they have that one drum that's just constantly bam, 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 bam. It's awesome. I love Calliopes. I love merry-go-rounds.
Anton LaVey played the Calliope.
Ooh.
There's some video of him like floating around, or you could. It's like him talking about and playing his Calliope.
Calliope
I want to watch
Calliopes?
that.
are cool.
They are.
I mean, it's cool.
Yo, you know what other instrument's cool? Glass harmonica.
Yes.
That's pretty
Agreed.
tight.
What does it look like?
It's a series
up,
of
look it
glass bowls on a dowel that they spin, and when they spin, their edge goes in this tray of water, and then you like play them like the glasses, you know?
It's like you're playing wine glasses, basically, but it's
A little more compact.
It was invented by Benjamin Franklin.
You should look it up.
Notorious party man.
Yeah,
Yeah,
nudist.
Ben Franklin loved to rave. The Ben Franklin rave is all glass harmonica music.
That's right. Oh my God, let's have a Ben Franklin rave.
This conversation
glass
is
harmonicas and people like
losing me.
experimenting with touching electricity.
And
This
a lot of
This
yeah, a
feels
lot of,
related.
sorry,
Kenny's been playing the Saw a lot in the living room,
nice.
Ah,
and that feels related to me in the scheme of sound.
Maybe like how the Tea Party had a a moment of power in the American politics show. We could restart the Hellfire Club
oh yeah, all right.
and dress up like Ben Franklin, but have raves and orgies and
I think that Ben
Man.
Franklin's so cool. I'm sorry.
Oh my god.
I'm 3 degrees removed from this conversation right now.
Was that?
There's 3 degrees of separation between me and this conversation right now.
Oh,
It was backing away slowly from the computer.
Tim doesn't like raves, Ben Franklin, or novelty instruments.
Those 3 things I successively have become removed.
it's hard. Ben Franklin was an amazing person. I'm not saying I
Right.
think that we need to like support him morally or whatnot, but like
Right.
his life was crazy. It's fascinating to read.
Yeah.
You can like love the story of his life without loving him personally.
Yeah, I mean, he lived in the 1700s. He was completely wrong according to our society today. But his story is insane. And
It's mind blowing. It's like, how does one man rape so many slaves? It's incredible.
he was more of a
Well, that
whoremonger
was-
than a slave raper, though, wasn't he?
Yeah, I don't think that I don't think that he was a slave raper. I think that
I just
eventually he
assumed.
murdered a bunch of children and buried them in his yard.
Oh, okay, got it.
Which I also think we've determined to be that he just let his doctor friends study anatomy in his basement.
Right.
Yeah.
I have a question regarding Ben Franklin and also linking back to the carbon dating situation. If we can stand here right now and say that any of those powdered wig motherfuckers from 1700s were wrong, which we can easily do, and we would have a lot of agreement, then, given the carbon dating situation, doesn't striving for power and recognition in our own time pretty much guarantee that you'll be reviled 300 years down the line?
Oh yeah, totally. I think that a key to recognizing that they were wrong is recognizing that we're definitely also wrong.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know, like for all that anyone else is racist and sexist, like you have to admit that you are too, no matter who you are.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Against
Just
something that you probably don't even know that you're being bigoted against.
And
Right.
This I feel like is part of why the concept of sin was invented. To get to like a symbolic way of describing this inability for a person to like make all the right choices and be right.
Well,
Yeah, knock you off the pedestal a little bit.
in my metaphysics, sin is anything that cuts you off from the holistic connection you have to everything. Like sin is any othering thing where you're like, I'm better than you, is a sin because it cuts you off from whatever it is that you think that you're better than, rather than the sympathetic or empathetic position, which would integrate you and recognize that we're all part of a system.
Yeah.
But likewise, being like, oh my God, you are the most perfect thing. I love you in this idolizing way. That's also a sin because it's still doing that, severing yourself off from a holistic connection.
Mm-hmm. I think that makes sense. And then so original
Yeah.
sin is the universal capability to do that, to cut yourself off. Everyone
I mean,
has that.
It's thinking that you exist at all, I would say, is the original sin. Just the concept that you are you, separate from anything else. You aren't. You're part of everything, and there's no way to extricate that. And this actually, when we were talking about the space in the middle of the Gamadian, like, kind of to a degree, our identity is formed by what other people think of us, which is definitely,
That's a really good.
yeah, like we are the negative space formed from other people's opinions of us, which came from us, but then we quickly reshape ourselves in response to.
You know what show does a really great job of exploring that theme is 6 Feet Under.
I would imagine.
Yeah,
It's a very
there's
good
like,
relationship.
yeah, there's like a constant presence of dead people speaking to those that they left behind, but the same dead person talks differently to everyone who remembers them.
Hmm.
And yet they all maintain like very like recognizable characters, you know. It's I guess Buddhism highly informed that script.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's part of where it comes from. But
Sounds Greek to me.
recommend it. I would say it's up there with Deadwood.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
And Attack on Titan.
Sure, okay. Those two things are so wildly far apart for me.
They are. But just as far as writing that makes you go, oh, writing is so cool.
Things that make you go,
Yes.
Things that go in the night.
Sure. Anyways, what else happens in Nightside of the Long Sun?
God, you guys, we
Chapter
are
4.
so funny. This book is
Chapter
so funny.
I think this book is very funny.
Oh, speaking of, here's a comedic moment I underlined. When he's on the roof and he crouches to study the distant villa on the grounds, straightening his low-crowned hat and drawing his black robe across the lower half of his face.
I love that.
Yeah, there's a similar thing in the next chapter where he does a somersault, where it's like something Metal Gear. Like, it's really funny how Batman Silk is being
Totally
outside of his own head here.
So far, these are my favorite chapters in the whole series so far. Is the section where he breaks into Blood's villa. I feel like is very strong, very interesting. I love chapter 5 so much. It might be my top favorite so far.
I think that this book is much better written than the last.
What? Better than Earth or New Sun?
Than New Sun. I do. I think that this book, in terms of like a novel,
Oh yeah,
the flow of this book is so much more comfortable. It moves from one point to another in an easy way instead of like New Sun is jarring. It's like here's a thought, here's a thought, here's a thought, and this is telling a wonderful story. And then I eventually find myself in this morass of philosophy that I didn't realize I was sinking in because the story was so pleasant and moving along.
The structure of New Sun is a picaresque, right? It's a series of vignettes strung together, like each chapter is its own little thing. And this has a modern, like of this century, kind of like idea of time, like just it's. I think it follows along pretty much from point A to point B, right, over the course of I don't know how much time.
It goes down real easy. Which I mean is a little bit funny, like talking about this as a more modernist novel when it's like, like Ulysses or something is not like an easy book to read, but it's clearly like an influence on this. And the picaresque, like a Don Quixote or whatever, it's like those are like pretty readable books too. Or like the Three Musketeers is like sort of a picaresque too, where it's just like a bunch of stuff happens. You can kind of pick it up and read a little bit of it whenever, and you'll get something out of it. But it's not like, you're not necessarily reading it front to back in the same way.
Yeah, that probably has a lot to do in the times in which they were printed too, because I don't know if this is true for the Three Musketeers, but it could have been read in installments. You know?
Yeah, it was serialized.
That's definitely
initially.
true for the Three Musketeers.
And
Yeah.
that's a lot of. I mean, a lot of early novels were serialized. I think really that is kind of like a 20th century, maybe like late 19th century thing, where it really started coming together as like a novel is this whole thing that you get through all at once, and not this, kind of like even Dickens was doing a lot of serialized novels. So it is interesting to me that like Wolfe's like modern novel is so readable. And his like more like antiquated, like picaresque, is like such a slog at times.
It's interesting how
I do also
TV
think
is
that,
making
like,
the same.
the
Oh, I was gonna say TV is doing the exact same thing, or has been doing the exact same thing for like the last 20 years, where
The same
like
switch.
even going back into the almost the late 90s, definitely in the mid 90s, like you couldn't have a story that didn't reset on TV. You had you like arcs had to be hidden by the writers basically, and optional.
We
And
have
now,
soap operas. Soap operas were like the only, and then like Twin Peaks, which is a soap opera. Like that's like all that you could.
Well, and then X-Files started to have their mythology episodes, which was a huge hit, and Seinfeld started to do it, and then Oz gave birth to the golden age of television.
Yeah,
As you see my lecture here on YouTube.
Oz definitely popularized it. I would say that the place where it happens is Prophet, which gets canceled from Fox for being too intense for the viewers on many
What year
levels.
was that?
I want to say it's like 95 or 94.
Huh.
It's like a Richard III kind of style where the main character is the scheming, plotting, horrible villain who you get his thoughts. I mean, also very much like House of Cards, I guess. But over the top. It's about a dude who works at a corporation that's pretty much Johnson & Johnson in disguise, and who was working his way up to become the CEO by blackmailing and tricking and all sorts of types of deceit. And
well, with TV too, I mean, you saw the sitcom had to at least usually take place like a week later from the last episode, right? Like it had to like have this like span of time in between each installment, like a little bit. Like you think of Seinfeld, for example, like I think like it seems like it's like about a week or so in between episodes, or maybe a month. But there has to be that gap of time. It would never just like continue straight on, except for like rare instances where there might be, like to be continued, which always seemed like this like really crazy thing when it happened in like 90s TV.
Two-parter. Prior to Seinfeld, I mean, things would do it to a degree, as we say, but prior to Seinfeld, episodes of sitcoms were designed to exist outside of time. So that you put them in syndication, it wouldn't matter. Or when you have runs, it wouldn't matter. Like, they could go in any order. And it kind of brings a whole new idea to puts jumping the shark in a new light, where like a show is good when those individual episodes truly do exist outside of time. Jumping the shark is when you finally have to have something happen in the world of the show. Something changes. They, the will they, won't they couple get married. That's jumping the shark. Now the show doesn't work because something finally happened. Isn't that weird?
Mm-hmm.
To bring back The Office, the American Office, I always found it. I came to that show very late and didn't see it till recently, and I found it really intriguing how that in the original British version you have this central relationship, which is like a very it's relatable, but it's unideal. It's very deromanticized kind of relationship that's not working, not pulling off, and the show ends at the moment of it starting to be a real relationship. And then, which I feel like it's the most reasonable thing to conclude is that relationship will fall apart or do whatever a real relationship does. Whereas in the American Office, at a certain point, they made that relationship happen, and when it did, it became the most idealized possible TV relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's, I mean, the
like,
strength of British TV is that it usually gets in and gets out before it has a chance to jump a shark. It's always just like, here's the idea, here's the thing. These characters will get maybe from point A to point B, but nothing else. And then you're not going to see them again.
Yeah, whereas the British Office is a critique of, you know, the whole world basically, but as definitely like office cultures and, you know, like work culture and relationships and work cultures. Whereas the American version, I think, awkwardly started to kind of capture that voice a little bit in the beginning, but had to become more American product. So it becomes, a more idealized and fantasy version of the work atmosphere. But it's also a very good show, if you ask me. I thought the American version is very satisfying.
It definitely makes that central relationship work narratively for a long time before you end up being like, oh, like fuck Jim and Pam. It takes them getting married. Really,
the best episode of the American Office. Now we're talking about the American Office, but like it's
I
like
had
in
a
the
really
last
hard time watching that show. I didn't really watch very much.
I watched the British Office. It made me feel at work I won't watch any Offices anymore.
In the last season, they like
it's better than you think, but it is also, there's like a lot of stuff about it that's a little like, it's interesting they went that way. And the way that relationship changes after they get married is insane, because it goes from being like, oh yeah, relationships are so hard, I can relate, to being a relationship that the way they portray it, I feel like would make 99% of people in relationships feel like theirs wasn't as good as it should be. You know, like the portrayal of Jim and Pam becomes so idealized that any real relationship compared to it seems lacking or seems
they cease becoming compelling characters once they get married, because they're just like, all right, we'll put them on a shelf. They're boring now, but also perfect.
But going back to your original point, Ryan, that's when this show starts becoming significantly less good, right?
Yeah.
That to me is an interesting thing. I guess I need to care about it more or watch it a bunch more but I do feel like I think that there's certain aspects of the writing they got better at as they went along. Like, I think the experience definitely did pay off in certain areas. Like, it's not a complete like breakdown of quality in the show. It's to me, it's like it's like I can't study the American Office because it would just say, I don't know, it would bring me in contact with people with whom I feel like we're not going to communicate well about the themes or whatever. But I do think that there is something really complex that happens in that show, where like certain parts of it just kind of become way less good, but that like little technical aspects of the writing become better.
Yeah, I'm a student of that show. I've watched it a bunch of times. I know what you mean.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a point where they really understand how, like, so much of that show is driven by skilled improvisers and like really well-defined characters. So as the show goes along, especially with the ensemble, like you get these smaller characters who like just have these moments that are so perfect because they embody those characters so well. And you don't have that as much at the beginning because it's a lot more like around this initial idea of like Michael Scott being unbearable.
Yeah. I feel like it becomes more like the Muppet Show as it goes on, and that's to like its credit. That when they figure out that all these other Muppets are like such a huge, bountiful part of why anyone likes the show, like let them be Muppets.
It becomes sillier and more fantastical. Yeah,
for sure.
It does lose quality though. The last few seasons are pretty bad.
Like the human element loses, but the fantastical element gains,
right.
And so it's for me that's very conflicting in any story, you know.
But that's also just like the story of every American sitcom too. Like every great American sitcom is like it's great, and then at a certain point something has to change, whether it's like a central character leaves or the creative team changes or like like the main person in it doesn't want to do it anymore.
Rudy's not cute anymore, so we get Raven Simone.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you always get those moments, and then you get like 2 or 3 seasons of the show where it's still going because it's still making money, but it's like a different show, and it's nowhere near as good. Like the last 2 seasons of Frasier, the last couple of seasons of Cheers. I mean, Seinfeld is pretty solid all through the end, but nothing ever changes in Seinfeld.
They put a bullet in it at the moment.
Seinfeld had plots that were going. Things constantly changed in Seinfeld because it was moving, and I think that's why it survived. Also, I think that Cheers is an example of having a big change happen in a show and it succeeding really well. Kirstie Alley taking over for Shelley.
But that happens like after the first third of the show's run. So like they establish a new normal really well, and still get like another 8-9 seasons out of it.
Cheers is like 11 seasons, isn't it?
I think Cheers is like 8 between. I can't remember. Frasier has 12 seasons, and I think Frasier ran longer than Cheers did.
Wow. Frasier is a show that, by its existence, jumped the shark.
It's bad. It's like Frasier's just awful. It is still pretty enjoyable to watch sometimes, though.
Always Sunny has done some pretty genius things with this idea of change happening to the formula. They did a really great thing where they had one of the major characters, there's like 4 or 5 actors that make up that show really, and one of the original creators who's in it, Glenn Howerton, gets another show in real life on network television, and it's like, well, I'm going to leave Always Sunny, and they did almost a year of promotion about this was going to be Glenn Howerton's last season. He's not going to be on the next season, and the next season started, and they had replaced him with Mindy Kaling in the show, and then at the end of the first episode, Glenn Howerton comes back and was like, "We punked you. Of course, I wasn't leaving this show at all." And I felt it doesn't work now in syndication or on binge watching, but at the time it was incredible. It was mind blowing because I had been for months convinced, how are they going to do this without this main dude out here? This is it. This is the end of the show. And I was being strung along entirely. I was being deceived on purpose so that I would be entertained, and I was.
The show Lex also does a really good job of playing with this, where they have a character that is a thing that's just a genetically engineered sex toy kind of person, who then in the final episode, who somehow is also a lizard, but then in the final episode becomes a bowl of custard. So that then the next season, when she's a completely different actress, it's because the bowl of custard, when it was turned back into a human, was different. And then they do it again and bring back the first actress for the third.
That show rules, by the way.
Which show is this?
Lex is a Canadian-German show.
It's the sexy sci-fi show, right?
It's insane. It's so insane.
It's awesome.
But there's other shows that do a good, like I think that Fringe does a good job of completely changing, like the season finale each season completely changes the rules of the world, so the next season is just inherently a different show that was built off of the last show. The German show Dark, I think, also does this really well. Of like,
I love that
show.
Good?
Completely changing rules so that it can move.
Well, I think I think that
Dark then circles back around on itself.
I think show creators are really having to do that, especially now when shows
focus on long form.
Yeah, well, because people just devour these shows like in a couple of days at a time. Usually, if you build that element of change into the narrative process, then it works a lot better. Instead of it being this like once a week, you come in and you think that you know what it's going to be, and then it's always stuff changing from this outside perspective. Or like Lost. I mean, we were talking about Lost earlier, where like that was a show where like you never really knew what was going on, but that was mostly because the creative team didn't actually know what was going on.
Well, they were fighting with the studio about what was going on.
Yeah, so like all of the issues with Lost are not with the like narrative form of it. Like they just didn't didn't have a way of building in all of the meddling and confusion behind the scenes into like the narrative process of the show.
Right.
So it just like gets way off the track, you know, like halfway through.
Speaking of way off the track,
Oh my god. Well, this all started because we were talking about the way that Wolfe wrote this book and how it's different.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a weird feelings about what differentiates this from New Sun, because one of the things that I feel like I'm most insecure about my own writing is that it doesn't move fast enough. Is that it's like this happened and then this happened and then this and then he said this and then he turned and he grabbed that off the table and then I feel like really insecure that is what stops people from enjoying my own writing, is that there's just this when are we going to stop hearing second by second and start getting a bigger thing? And this book definitely feels second by second, but like I don't know, like Connor was saying, like the way it transitions from things to things is really graceful.
It's decompressed in a lot of ways, but it's like it's decompressed, but it continues to move. Like I think it works because there are never these points where it's decompressed and nothing is happening. Like it's always decompressed because a lot of stuff is happening. And so it's always, you're moving through all of these things that are happening. You're not necessarily skipping through. I mean, obviously some of it's getting skipped, but like you don't have a lot of moments where it's just Silk like sitting and waiting on something.
Well, you even do sometimes, but like narratively, how Wolfe constructs this is that he tells stories, and I mean, there's not a ton going on. I'm not saying there's not a lot going on, but it's just like it's not like an overwhelming amount of forward action happening, but that when you're reading the narrative, you're actually getting absorbed in a lot of detail. And that's what really makes the construction of this narrative, and a lot of books and different writing styles that work like this, really effective as like works of fiction, is that you're seeing the play by play, but you're also really getting a very high level of detail, which is stimulating to your imagination as you're reading it along.
Am I wrong to think the reason that New Sun is so much more popular than Long Sun is that level of detail? Is that like, I don't know, for some reason I associate this intense level of detail with like people who really like reading in a way that people who aren't necessarily like super bibliophiles can hang with the less detail easier.
I feel like it's less popular because people get into New Sun and then they just like don't want to do the work of reading more. You read the most popular one and then you're like, I read that. I don't know. Like, I think it's like you got to be kind of like.
Well, especially because most people who start New Sun only get through like part of Shadow of the Torturer. Like that, I feel like the actual completion rate for the whole book is, low double digits as far as percentage goes. This
book is just such a radical piece of science fiction. I mean, when you start reading it, like, it doesn't really seem that science fiction-y. You gotta sort of scratch beneath the surface. It seems kind of like a pastoral, genteel tale going on here. Anyway, Connor.
It's funny too.
Oh man.
Jen.
Before we get too far away from this topic, this book is present and in the moment.
Right.
Whereas Severian, every single moment never dies. So each moment is its own entire world. And that lends itself to abstraction, because you can never be in this moment. All the other moments are still there. This is only ever in the moment. Because Severian's an intellectual and Silk is John Locke.
Silk is not waiting to be wise enough to act, because then he'll be waiting forever.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes a lot of his. I think that's what it makes a lot of like Silk's internal thought process like a little more digestible, because it isn't this like tremendously thought out thing. It's just kind of like he's feeling things and you're seeing it. Like I feel like
this being written by Horn.
Yeah, exactly. Silk is inhumanly humble.
Right. Yeah, I mean I was thinking about like Faulkner I think that this is a lot more readable than a lot of Faulkner, but Faulkner does this thing particularly in As I Lay Dying and The Sound and the Fury, where you have these characters that have these like sort of like insane passages of interiority where you're just like kind of understanding how they think and what their own voices are to themselves. But the function of that is not to like, you know, make these characters seem like really complex and philosophical and thoughtful. It's to make them feel like real people. Like you empathize with them so much because you get right into the middle of their head while they're thinking. And I think that happens.
Not just what they're thinking, but how they're thinking.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like you're seeing that circuit kind of happen. Yeah. And I think here, I mean, we're getting a version of that. Obviously, it's through this filter of Horn, but like, I think that's part of why Silk is a lot more empathetic than Severian for sure, because you're just like, oh, like he's like this 23-year-old kid. He's had some crazy shit happen to him. And now he's kind of just thinking through it as he's flying by the seat of his pants. And with Severian, it's like, you chose this. Like, you chose to tell us all of this, and you come off being like a dumb asshole this whole time.
Well, and Severian is definitely always lying, and Silk is incapable of lying because he is a fabrication.
He's not even the author.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Silk, everything that Silk says and does is true because this Silk isn't real. So it's really what this Silk is. Like it's so
destined to be the fate of every person who dies.
Yeah.
All of us will eventually become something that can't lie.
Right.
And I guess Severian can never become that because he can't really die, right? Right? I mean, like if he just becomes another
the next person,
the next Autar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know who's tortured like that? Vampires.
Severian is a fucking vampire. I believe that.
There's vampires in the world.
Yeah, I don't think he's talking about Severian.
What?
There's a lot of vampire stuff in this book.
Oh.
Yeah, there's vampires.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Vampire
Who's
priests.
vampire? Oh, yeah.
Flying
Literally.
vampire priests.
Flying vampire priests.
From space.
From space.
The flying vampire priest from space.
You know what?
Who knew Gene could get so pulpy?
Next time someone asks me what this book's about, that's what I'm going to say.
Yeah. Honestly, that'll probably get them to read it more than anything else you could tell them.
Flying vampire priest from space.
That's about as pulpy a description of a Gene Wolfe book as I could ever think of.
It's like Star Wars, but with vampire priests.
It's not inaccurate.
I mean, the Sith are basically vampire priests, right? So
I guess so.
there you go.
I mean, now Palpatine is stated as a vampire. As of the Andy Wendy.
And it's all because they backed off on they wussed out about Jar Jar.
Because they wussed out about Jar Jar.
Yeah.
It all went wrong when they pulled that punch.
Don't worry, Favreau will fix it.
Dark Jar Jar.
I feel like one thing we have to keep track of in this narrative too is like the times when stuff, because in light of like the detail-oriented nature of the telling or whatever, I feel like it also you have to pay attention to when stuff is like just left out.
Yeah.
That happens a fair bit.
It happens a lot.
Yes. Severian's omissions are always very conspicuous, and yeah, the omissions here are a lot harder to catch.
I mean, like when I was just reading the other day, it was like that part where Kypris comes to the window at the funeral,
Mm-hmm.
which he actually publicly shows up and there's like it describes the colors and but then it never says anything about like what she says or like does, and then like just like completely gets skipped. And then it's like it goes from like the swirling colors at the beginning to like the swirling colors at the end, and it talks about like a couple people's feelings,
Yeah.
or like inner thoughts, but it never actually describes like what the fuck.
The submarine
Yeah.
escape is skipped over, I think.
Yeah.
The what?
Submarine escape. You know,
Right, yeah, like there's all kinds of shit.
circuit
that gets,
trainer
like,
on the submarine, and then suddenly they're having a beer.
right.
Yeah.
Got out.
Yeah, we got out of that one. Clink.
And yet, when the thing that's happening is a couple people walking through darkness to where they're not sure, that is like 4 chapters long.
And there's
Right.
like
Oh.
6 different scenes
The
of
worst.
It's strange. Going back into this, I had this muscle memory of like, okay, there's certain parts of this that are just take forever because they take forever because like you're learning what happens every second of thought in Silk's head. Everything he sees, he connects to something, and then he sees something new and connects that to something. And yet, in my reread, it's not been as hard as it felt the first time with those parts. I feel more pulled than when I didn't know what was coming.
I think that the first read of this book is painful.
Yeah.
Especially once you start to me, like once the revolution starts, you're
Yeah.
like, fuck this, I want to give up. I
Yeah.
don't understand what this is at all. And then the second time, when you know what to expect, you're like, good Lord, this is so pleasant.
Yeah, that's the experience I've been having. It's like stuff that I was like kind of dreading a little bit has all been fine in my reread. It's like,
Because you don't need to know the details of the battle, etc. When they go into it, and so I think maybe the first time you're like, okay, how do I keep this straight? What the fuck is happening? But once you realize that doesn't necessarily matter so much, and that there's other things being told to you
Yeah.
in the process, that like it's because that's the whole like breaking into bloods in place and stuff like that took me so long the first time to get through because I just hated it so much. And yeah, this time I was like, oh yeah, that took me like 20 minutes to read that.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
things I thought were halfway through the book happen in the first quarter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
time is funny in this one.
Yeah.
It is, and that is I just realized it's 2:00.
It is.
Yeah.
Which last time I looked up, which felt like it just was a minute ago, it was like 12:30. But I have to go.
All right.
I think we hit
When are
everything
meeting next?
important in this chapter.
The 30th, August 30th.
The 3rd.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I can't make it that day. I'm gonna be out of town that weekend.
Do we?
Where are you
Oh, the
going?
whole.
That whole weekend, yeah.
I mean,
I'm gonna be with my momsies.
What do we say then about doing it next Sunday and skipping that weekend, compressing one?
Yeah.
I'm fine with one. I'm fine with that.
Next week, do that.
Yeah, we'll do
What's
chapter
that?
5 next week.
16th. Or no, that's
Yeah.
today.
So 23rd.
23rd.
That's
I could do
the
that.
First or second day of Virgo, right?
Yes,
Sure.
that means that Ryan's birthday is coming up.
Pretty good.
And Jordan's.
I'll see you guys then.
All right,
Okay.
bye.
1 week. We'll see all of our viewers then.
Yeah, like,
Yeah, see you
subscribe.
next Sunday.
Like,
Bye, Joseph.
Bye. Use it.
Joseph and the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
All right.
Okay, people are actually leaving.
Yeah, I guess we're done.
We're still waving. I mean, I'm not doing anything, but okay.
I gotta go buy groceries. I'll see y'all later.
Okay.
Good
Bye,
morning,
bye,
guys.
Mark.
We got a heart from someone named Morning Dove in the chat.
Damn. Hearts
A
are
heart? What's a heart?
Oh, but they retracted their message.
What?
Let me show. I'll show you guys this thing. I'm gonna screenshot the chat.